Good evening, folks. Welcome. I'll call the meeting of May 24th, 2016 to order. And Councilmember Donchak, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Donchak.
Here.
Councilmember Ham.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward.
Here.
Mayor Baker.
Here.
First item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing and workshop concerning the City of San Clemente proposed budget for fiscal year 2017.
So one thing just for the audience for participation purposes, we're going to start off with the workshop where the city staff will do a presentation. At the conclusion of that workshop, we'll then open up the public hearing and take public comments. So if you're filling out a speaker card, please turn it into either the city clerk or the deputy city clerk. And when we get to the public hearing portion, we'll segue into that. So pretty quickly, I want to do a quick brief introduction. So as we've already spoken about in the long-term financial plan, as well as recently when we gave the council members the proposed budget for 17, we spoke about investing in today to protect tomorrow. So that's a theme that's going to be consistent within the 2017 proposed budget, with a number of things that we're doing based on the LTFP or other recommendations that help in the future infrastructures and core services the city delivers. And so with that, I'll kind of touch quickly on the budget highlights before we actually get into the department overviews. So tonight, we're doing the budget workshop and the public hearing. As I talked about, we'll do the workshop, then we'll open it up to the public hearing. And then based on tonight's direction from council, we'll be bringing back the budget for adoption at the Monday, June 13th council meeting. Going a little bit more into the budget key themes. So these 3 points are really important to the city of San Clemente. So we want to continue to maintain a strong financial foundation, which is not only achieved going through our long-term financial plan, but it's also by our maintaining our AAA credit rating, which later tonight, Judy Vinson will touch on the credit rating as it related to the LTFP and the reserve allocations that we talked about. It's also providing effective services in a cost-efficient manner. And so the annual budget process, the monitoring of staff levels, and the balanced budget are the tools that allow us to provide those services in a cost-effective manner. And then the other bullet point is safeguarding essential technology and infrastructure. So going back to my original theme of investing today to protect tomorrow, not only is it infrastructure, but it's technology that is a major component to what the city does in terms of delivering services. And so you'll see a number of those recommendations in the budget that come out of the Information Technology Strategic Plan that the council adopted. We're going to continue to fund infrastructure maintenance and improvements. We're going to fund the Information Technology Strategic Plan, and we're going to maintain healthy reserves. So, I can't preface what a good way this is to lead into the proposed budget 2017. We're on good ground financially to continue to keep a good path for City of San Clemente for decades. So again, tonight, we're going to do the budget overview. We're going to go over the department budget highlights. We're going to do the CIP program overview. We're going to have a couple of council decision packages that you'll have to deliberate on. We're going to open up the public hearing, and then we're going to close it out with questions and concerns or direction from the council, and that will conclude the process tonight. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy Administrative Services Director, Judy Vincent, to begin the budget overview.
The clicker from your, Eric.
Oh, clicker.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening, council members and Mayor Baker. We're here tonight for our annual budget overview and workshop and public hearing. So we're going to talk about, first of all, our all funds summary. So this is our total budget for all funds, including our capital and one-time items. And so our total expenditures for the 17 are 136.7 million, and revenues 122.6 million. If we look at what that breaks down to in terms of our expenditures by fund, our general fund at about 65.5 $6.5 million is still our largest fund, and it contains most of the services that people associate with the city, our fire services, police services, our parks, our code enforcement, planning, engineering, those types of things. And then you can see we have the other funds here, and we don't want to forget those, and we'll talk a little bit about those at the end of the presentation, just some highlights from those. Our second largest fund group is our enterprise funds, and that's our water, sewer, storm drain, utility type funds. So again, our total spending plan at $136.7 million for all funds. If we look at this, we're just going to focus on the general fund now for most of the slides coming up. And if you look at the general fund in total, including one-time items, total for 17, this is a comparison, 16 to 17. Our total expenditures at $65.5 million compared to total revenues at $59.9 for 17. Now again, usually you don't want your expenditures higher than your revenues, but in this case, because it includes our capital and one-time items that we set aside funds for, that's why we have it this way in terms of higher expenditures.
Go over that one more time. Talk about that, make that point one more time, Judy.
Okay, and you'll see other slides, we'll talk about it too, but our expenditures here are higher than our revenues because we use one-time funds to pay for capital projects. In other words, we save money every year from our unassigned fund balance and other funds that come in, and then that is used to fund capital projects on a one-time basis. One of the keys we have, if we go here, our operating budget, that's the one that's key, that we don't want to spend more than we bring in on an ongoing basis. And so you can see our ongoing for fiscal year 17, $57.8 million of revenue, which is higher than our $57 million in expenditures projected for the coming year. So we do always want to make sure that we maintain this in a positive manner. And one thing I do want to point out, and I should have said this at the beginning, on the top right-hand side of some of these slides, you'll see a page number, and that relates to page numbers in your budget where you'll see either the charts or further information on what we're talking about. So you can refer to that as we go through if that's helpful for you. So we just talked about our operating position. This is it, down to the dollar, if you will. So we said that approximately $800,000, it's $752,910. And I think this is a really important slide because in past years, we've seen this operating position, last maybe 3 or 4 years, be very low. 160,000, I think, was our lowest, maybe 200, 300,000. It's really important that we try and keep this a little bit higher. In way years past, these were up to over $1 million we would have an operating position. And this is really kind of your cushion. So if our revenues don't come in quite as we expect, if we have store sales taxes, something closes down or doesn't operate as we think, this gives us a little bit of leeway to manage that. And the money that's here that we save per year, if you will, this goes into our fund to be able to use for capital projects in the future. So the higher this balance is each year, the more that helps us for future years, as well as we have some big items coming up that are going to be higher expenses. Our revenues may not grow at the same manner. So this gives us some room to handle that in coming years as well. So this represents about 1.3% of the total budget. And in past years, as I said, we were way under 0.5% of total budget. Okay, so let's look at the general fund total revenue. You'll see the adjusted budget here, then a projected for 16, and then the third column is the actual budget for 17, and then the dollar change, as well as a percentage. And so in total, our total general fund revenues are going up about $1.3 million in total. There's many components of that. Some of the larger components you'll see there, the 68% or 69 intergovernmental, and that's, it's a smaller dollar amount, it's a higher percentage, but that's related to some grants that we have coming up, the Safe Route to Schools grants. But the largest items by far, as you can see, are our taxes at $44.8 million. That includes property tax, sales tax, franchise fees, and that type of thing. So there's a whole, that's really the largest component of our revenue. So we're going to dig into that just a little bit here and look at property taxes. So I think last year, Councilmember Brown, you wanted to see sort of a chart showing that growth. And so as you can see, we've been having good, steady growth here for the last 3, 4, 5 years. So that's been a good thing. This is a function of new development in the city, higher sales for homes, as well as home values going up as the economy improves. That one little bump, if you will, in 2013. I always bring this up. The state had borrowed some money back in 2010, and you'll see a drop. It was about a $2.2 million borrow, and then it was paid back to us in 13. So you see kind of that, it's not as smooth as you would think, but it's just those two little blips. So if we move on and we look at sales tax, you can see over the last 3 years, 15, 16, 17, or from 2 years, 16 and 17, there's large amount of growth there. That's due to the opening of the outlets at San Clemente Outlet Mall, as well as in the coming year, the Estrella development, which just opened, I think just a few weeks ago. At least 3 of the stores have opened. So we have an Ulta, TJ Maxx, and a Sprouts supermarket there, and I think there's a couple more stores that'll be opening in the fall. And so you can see this is a good story as well with our sales tax growth contributing to our general fund revenues. This also indicates, besides those new developments, we just have consumer spending is increasing each year, so 3.9% growth in, even without the development, we were seeing that kind of growth in sales tax revenue. So in our expenditures for general fund, total expenditures, we have a decrease from the adjusted budget for 16 of 2.6 million about. But again, this is total expenditure, so it includes our capital projects. And one of the largest capital projects that we were about to complete, but was budgeted, was our Ole Hansen Beach Club, and that's almost $4 million. So really, you know, the reduction here, there's still growth in the general fund expenditures, but then when you take out that $4 million in capital projects, you see this overall reduction. We're going to look at a few of these categories. The biggest one, really, we're going to look at is personnel budget. So we have a few slides here to talk about personnel. We have an MOU in place with our general employees that will go through this next fiscal year. We'll have to renegotiate starting in January. I think we're planning to do that for the coming years, but right now we have a contract in place. It includes salary increases in July of each year. There's also an offset, and employees are picking up a share of their retirement costs. And then the city is paying a portion of health care costs that increases in the second and third years, which we're now in the third year of the contract. So all of those items are included in the budget you have in front of you. And then we also have some ongoing step increases for employees. That's included there as well. We have added some additional positions in fiscal year 17 that are in the proposed budget. You can see the total 1.85 is the total increase in positions that is being proposed. These are all in the general fund. The only one that's a true full position is a revenue analyst, a limited term. If you remember when we had the LTFP presentation, we talked about hiring an analyst to help us do some audits of our business licenses, our vacation rentals, and our hotel revenues, because we haven't been able to do those audits, and so we want to make sure that we're collecting, that people understand what they're supposed to be paying, and we're collecting it. And we feel that this position will be able to be paid for through the revenue that we're going to generate from those, from what they do. And we're going to evaluate that after a year and see if it's going well, and bring that back to council, whether you want to keep that position. In addition, there's some small quarter-time FTE increases in business licensing to help with the workload there. We have a recreation specialist. This is the only addition that we're adding for the opening of Ole Hansen. We are adding hourly, unbenefited hourly time, but this is the only benefited increase we have, and it's just a quarter of a full-time position. There's also an office specialist in finance and administrative services that is currently half-time, going to 3/4. And there's an office specialist in code enforcement that's at 0.9%, going to 40 hours, a full-time position. In addition, we have 3 frozen positions in the budget, and what that means is the count is still in our position count, but we don't fund these items. And so we keep them as, you know, some of the positions we analyze over a couple of years, and if we still need it, we may fund it again, but if we find that, you know, we're operating without it and we don't need it, sometimes we drop them. And so that's what happened last year. We had several unfunded positions for a while, and we actually eliminated, I think, 4 or 5 of them. And so the new ones this year, the Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Director is not funded in the budget, and the Water Quality Co-Compliance Inspector in the Clean Ocean Fund is unfunded. We're handling that in a different manner. So, you know, it's important as we talk about adding positions to kind of look at, well, how does this look over a 10-year timeline? You know, are we growing positions every year, or are we reducing? What's going on here? So, as you can see, from 16 to 17, we're going from 196.94, I know it's kind of an odd pointed number, to 201. And if you can do your math, you go, well, wait a minute, that's more than 1.85 in positions. And that's because during the year, council had authorized some other positions that we were added. All of those are in our enterprise and utility funds. There's one in golf, and there's a couple more in the utility fund. So they weren't general fund positions, but they were in the total for the city. But if you look back, 10 years ago in 2007, our total positions were 218. So we're actually operating about 17 positions less than we were 10 years ago. With a growing city and new development and that type of thing, new parks and that type of thing, we're still operating 17 positions less than we were 10 years ago. These are some other staffing changes. I won't read them all, but we want to also point out that positions are constantly being, not constantly, but continuously being analyzed to see if there's maybe, as positions become vacant, maybe the position can be downgraded and we can do with kind of a lesser grade position. Sometimes the people that are in a position are doing more work and we upgrade those positions. So some of the reclassifications you see here, and then some are retitled positions that you see. And all of this on page 323 in your budget book kind of lists out what all of these items are and kind of gives you a little more detail on the staffing. And we'll talk a little bit about pension costs. So overall, we have a decrease in our pension costs for 17 as compared to the prior year, about a 7.7% increase in total. Now, there's a few things that make up the pension, so it gets a little complicated, as we've said in the past. So we did have, the good thing is we had moved to CalPERS for pension in June of 14. We had a flat rate for 2 years at 12.099%. We got a new rate for 17. It's actually reduced to 8.476. Now that's the employer share. As I mentioned earlier, our employees are picking up a bigger share of their pension, so that also helps reduce pension costs. We still have our retired and inactive employees remaining with, it's now called Empower. It used to be Great West Retirement Services. It's now Empower. So when you hear that, you'll think about Great West. So those costs are actually going up a little bit because it's unfunded liability. And so the combination of all of these things, including new employees coming in at a lower PEPRA rate with pension, resulted in the decrease in pension costs. I want to mention our city's public safety employees, our safety lifeguard, those marine safety employees, that's actually remaining pretty flat in pension costs. This is pending a pay down of unfunded liability that we'll be bringing back to council here pretty soon. We talked about in the LTFP paying down that liability somewhat. And then we have to pay for our retired, inactive police and fire. This is not our current contract, but people used to work here a long time ago, and we pay an annual amount on that, and that's going up about $97,000 for the coming year. Okay. So I was asked to provide a slide like this. It was just interesting as we looked at, for the city, if you take all of our members who are in pension, our marine safety as well as our general employees, we pay about 20 cents per payroll dollar for their pension. We also contract out, and so there's often an interest in how much we pay in pension for our fire and police. While it's part of our contract, it's interesting that our fire, the average for safety members is about 55% cents per payroll dollar, and for police, the average for the safety and management members is about 67 cents per payroll dollar. So just a comparison there. So if we look at total general fund expenditures by department, this is sort of the same slide you saw before. You saw it by type with personnel, supplies, that type of thing. This takes it and puts it in a different view by department. And if you look on the far right, comparing the budget 16 to the budget for 17, you can see that for the most part, very few departments are increasing. I mean, general government, 1% increase, finance is going down 1%, community development down 5%, public works only up 1%, but our fire and police contracts, those are the things that are increasing, and we don't have a lot of control over those, but anyway, so those are going up, and that's what's, some of the driving force behind our increase in costs. So I'm going to talk about just the departments in general and just some highlights. This is sort of a hodgepodge of things, highlights for each area. But general government, we have interfund transfers totaling $3.9 million. About $3 million of that are transfers to reserve funds, and a lot of this is from the discussions we had at LTFP about moving some of the sustainability fund, and I'll talk about that in a minute, over to the reserve funds. We also continue our transfer to the street improvement fund, $756,290. We've been doing that for several years. Our contribution to the Casa Animal Shelter is up about $6,000. to $723,590. We do have DBA funding included for $34,200, which is about a 5% decrease from the prior year. Our council contingency is again $100,000 for the coming year, as it has been in the past several years. We have election expenses. This will be an election year, so about $74,000 is budgeted for that. It may end up being a little bit less than that because I think we're doing something a little different than we had thought when we originally put the budget together, but that's what we have in the budget now. And then we also have community grants, as we do every year, and the total of those is $77,060. There's a budget enhancement decision package, if you will, that's included as well, which is a agenda legislative management system to provide more electronic way to manage the agendas that you get at City Council. Next department, Finance and Administrative Service highlights. There's reductions in this department because of several studies that were budgeted in the prior year. And the RSVP program remains in Human Resources, which had changed last year, and that's working out well so far, so we're leaving it there. Some of the enhancements we already talked about, the increases in the personnel, and then the last one there, a citywide cashiering system evaluation is part of the IT strategic plan.
And really quick before we move on, as we go through these department highlights, if you have questions on each of these departments, this will be an opportunistic time to ask them, and if we need to bring up department heads or division managers to come up and answer the questions, we can. There'll always be room at the end as well, but since we're covering these items.
Okay, so we're going to move to public safety. We'll spend a little bit more time on this because it is an important information for the public and for our council. So total funding in public safety for this year is $24.9 million, which represents 44% of our general fund operating budget. Three components to public safety. We have our marine safety piece at $1.7 million. This is actually budgeted in our Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Department, but we consider it part of our public safety program. And just to point out, our junior lifeguard education program was expanded in the prior year, and that's been very successful and continues to be a successful program with the expansion. We'll move to police services. So our total police services budget is $14.2 million. Now keep in mind, we get a little confused sometimes. That's not just the contract. The most of it is our contract with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, but there are things in there like our school crossing guards, some of our citation hearing officers. There's a local police services budget where we have a department downstairs, our office downstairs, and we fund office supplies and things like that there. So the 14.2 is mostly the contract, but there's other items as well. So the OCSD contract increases by about $928,000, 7.26%. Several changes there. You can see them listed. We're adding a full-time investigator. We're adding a full-time deputy 2. We're adding a half-time crime prevention specialist. Now, this is an extra help position, so it's a part-time, non-benefited. We're defunding a motorcycle deputy. It's vacant right now. It has been vacant for a little bit, so we're defunding that to help fund some of the other items. And we're defunding a vacant staff assistant position. We also had, because we're adding the full-time investigator, we had 2 half-time investigators, so we're going to remove one of those and still keep a half-time investigator along with the new full-time when we're adding. In addition, the Orange County Sheriff's Department just recently completed negotiations for pay increases on all of their labor contracts, and so those pay increases are also included in the additional cost. I believe the total increase was 4% for the officers, not the management, but the AOCDS, I think it's called. 4% in pay, and then there's another 2% in health costs that are being provided to the officers. In addition, one of the biggest things that's driving this contract increase is there's a new overtime costing model. And what that means is in the past, and I'm hoping I'm going to get this right, I have some people backing me up here in case I don't get this right. But in the past, what would happen is we would have vacancies, and we still do. You have vacancies periodically. As we say, we have a vacant motorcycle deputy staff assistant. And so those vacancies could either be paid out to the city as credits on our invoices each month, or sometimes they're held back because the department knows, the lieutenant knows that he has to hire overtime or hire others to fill those vacancies. He might have to hire someone on an overtime basis for a month because he has a deputy out on workers' comp, for instance. And so what has happened, those vacancies in the past, we would get some of them credited, but some of them would be held and would be used to pay down the overtime in the subsequent year. And so what was happening, it was kind of hard for us to understand, well, how much is our overtime and how much is our vacancies? It was always kind of this pull, and I think a lot of cities were having that problem. And so the Orange County Sheriff's Department's contract division made a change this coming year where we're going to get all the credits just paid off this year. And then next year, they're increasing the overtime. They're not going to use the credits from this year to pay down the overtime for next year. And so you're seeing this larger increase in this year because of that. So I hope that was clear. If you have questions, we can pull up some of the, we have our staff from the Orange County Sheriff's Department here. Okay, so let's move on. So just like we showed you with the overall city staff, this is the police contract staffing. Now, this is just the sworn officers. We do have some administrative staff downstairs, crime prevention specialists, that type of thing. But the sworn officers, you can see for 17, we're at 43.5. So we're actually going up by 0.5 in total. And the green items that are highlighted there are where you'll see a change. So if something went up or down, you'll see it in the green item there. So back in 2007, we were at 42, so we're, about 1.5 FTE, full-time equivalent, higher than we were 10 years ago. There's been some ups and downs over the last several years, but that's where we're at now. Okay, let's move to fire services. We'll talk about that for a minute.
I only have two things I'm deeply, profoundly interested in.
Yes.
I have a lot, but that I want to talk about tonight. And one is the police service. Should I stop you now or at the end of the whole public safety?
Really up to you. How are you?
Okay. So here's the idea. And this is an important chart to stop on. In every other department in the city, we've master planned our future. We've done it with technology. We've done it with beaches, parks, and recreation. I want to seriously ask for a 5-year master plan on police services for the city of San Clemente, and I'll tell you why. And I would like the headline to be "Not Business as Usual," because we have a hospital closing. We have the La Pata extension coming through. We have the 320-some homes in Marblehead Coastal coming online. We have 1,000 new workers potentially at the outlet malls. We have the De Los Mares shopping center that you alluded to earlier. We have a situation where we're going to have 2 high schools rather than 1 high school once La Pata opens up in a bigger way than we have. In other words, there's a lot going on besides this, which has been what we've been doing. The other thing, and you've been on council quite a while too, we kind of hunkered down during the recession, and we put a lot of pressure on police services to toe the line and carry their fair share of the recession. We're at a place right now where I think it's really important to do it right going forward. And so what I'm asking for is a master plan for the next 5 years rather than, I appreciate that we fill positions part-time, full-time a little bit here, 1 motor there, 1 deputy there, but I'd really like to have a roadmap for what we're doing in public safety. So I wanted to put that out there as a directive. Obviously, it can't work its way into this budget, but I think the time is right to do that. So I just wanted to put that out there, and because we are one of the 100 safest cities in the United States on some surveys, I'd like to keep it that way. And there's so many moving parts going on. So do you see what I'm asking?
I do hear what you're asking, and
Okay.
we'll discuss it with, Eric and James and kind
Okay.
of come up with a game plan for that.
Okay.
And
I don't know if there's such a thing as a matrix study for police
Yeah.
security. The other thing I would point out too is when the community looks at our public safety, they don't understand that marine safety is part of it. And in many, many cities in California, code enforcement is also recognized as a public safety expense. So I'd really like us to be transparent in terms of what we do to keep the community safe, and with an eye toward code enforcement and making sure that we get credit for all the good work that happens at the beaches as well as through OCSD. So that's my piece on this, but
okay.
I'd like us to have a roadmap, and then I'm sure some combination of us are willing to take it to the sheriff if we need to go, to the county and say, hey, San Clemente wants to do it a little bit different. Help us find a way to do this. So.
We will have, as part of the budget, we've recommended a matrix assessment of code enforcement, business licensing, planning, and then also some engineering development services as it relates to the counter experience, and then also with the STLUs impacting us with the ordinances recently adopted, looking at, do we have the right resources deployed to address these regulations? And so we'll have Matrix here so we can talk to them about the code enforcement aspect of the discussion you had, but then what we would probably end up doing is having a discussion with OCSD. I think it would be important to get council's priorities of what they would want to get out of a potential study in terms of, is it looking at the deployment of services? Is it looking at the cost of services? Is it looking at bringing a new model of how we do policing in San Clemente to address crime? Those types of things, which I think any one of those, Matrix or other providers, could assist with. Matrix has some experience with OCSD. They recently did an assessment with Laguna Woods and Aliso Viejo, if I recall, on some different things. But what we could probably do is probably then bring it back as a white paper for the LTFP in 2017 with the results and try to get some direction if that was the will of the council.
Well, and what I'm looking for, to be clear, is a strategic plan. What does it look like to be safe in San Clemente? So is the bottom the gang injunction? You know, we have zero tolerance for gangs. Is it a traffic-driven idea because we have so many problems with traffic? Is it having to do with the fact that Prop 47 has dealt us a new deck of cards and we want to be responsive to that? But I'm looking for a strategic plan, and then a chart like this that says, oh, so therefore we need one more investigator, or we need 2 more motorcycles, or we need 3 more something. So, but a master plan. Because we're not going to have a hospital, we're going to have more workers, we're going to have more houses.
Is there, oh, sorry, Kathy, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Based on that, I think it's good that you mentioned code enforcement, because I think some of our code enforcement, we are ramping that up, and they are going to be responding to some of the nuisance calls that I know our sheriff is getting bogged down now with. Also, some of that staffing, we need to make sure that our special enforcement and our directed enforcement teams are fully staffed, because I think that's where we get a lot of work done. And then also maybe asking for directed patrol of hotspots of activity in our city, which might be a different way than how we're doing it now. So things like that. But I agree that we aren't getting enough credit for some of the other things that we do that people don't realize that's part of the public safety. And our new STLU ordinance, this is a whole new ballgame with the ordinances that we have in place. So I'd like to see how those are working out.
Well, and building on that, a substation might make sense. And I know the lieutenants thought about that, but, you know, maybe we need 2 places rather than just one place. Either maybe it's Talega, maybe it's out at the outlet malls, I don't know. But and that's a tactical suggestion. I'm looking for the strategic framework of what's it take to be safe in San Clemente.
I have one, so I like the idea of having a strategic plan going forward. I would expand that. I think you said a master plan for police services. I think that in this regard, one of the things that I don't want to be an outcome of this is that we're in there telling the sheriff's department, here's how you should police in San Clemente, here's our master plan, we deliver it to you, now go and implement our plan. I think that there's, I'm sure that's not what you intended. I think that what I'd like to see is maybe what we call a public safety plan, you know, or broaden the scope a little bit so you're including fire as a part of that, code enforcement, marine safety. But more importantly, as part of that master plan is that if you look at it more of a modular component where we would look at staffing levels and budget assignments, things like that, I don't want to, as part of this, I don't want to tell the police how they should do their job, because frankly that's their specialty. But I think that we can look at elements we can control as part of this. For example, a component for homelessness that tends to generate a lot of public safety activity in our town. Is there a way we can address that as a community from a strategic level, where we can look at more causal factors as opposed to how the police approach the homelessness question, so that we can, you know, maybe look at what our policies are through FAM and other things. And a second component of that would be for our zoning, and like Kathy mentioned, our zoning code. You know, by these zoning changes, are we going to be attacking the causal factors that are putting stress on our police department? See, I like an idea of a master plan, but only a plan on things that we can actually control outcomes, and that we're not stepping into fire and police and saying, well, we need to change the way you do business, as much as having them maybe be modular parts of that, and we can help with staffing and budget, but that we're looking from a city across the breadth and width of our services and saying, how can we make it a better place from a traffic point of view? You mentioned, congestion traffic. How can we work on those things to maybe release stress off of our public safety folks? And so I really like the idea of that plan on a larger public safety level, and attacking it in a way that we would be able to develop a plan around things we can control, and then work with police and fire in terms of coordination on how we could fit that together. And that feels a lot more, that feels very comfortable to me. I hope I'm making sense.
I agree with everything you said, and my intention was that it would be from the bottom up, that it would be the lieutenant that would be the driver for what I see when I look at this chart and when I listen to the budget conversations is we wait for the increase from the county, and then we figure out how we can make our budget work once we get that piece of information. And I know that's the reality, but I'd like to upset the equation so that we have an idea of what we'd like, and then let's see if we can budget to that, and even in fact get the county to cooperate with us. But it feels rightly or wrongly to me that we're given a number, and then it's like, well, gee, then this time we can afford one more of this, or a half of this, or nothing else, because that's just a cost of living that's being passed through. But yes, I do agree that it's better if there may be things that can be either solved outside of public safety that the city could
Or just relieve the pressures.
Yeah. But
Addressing root causes in our community,
Yeah.
and things we can do. We're not going to go out there and invent, things that we can do, but things we can do that could help release the pressure off our public safety folks to make it easier for all of
Right.
us to
Yeah.
provide a better quality.
Well, and I think that's the approach that we have been taking with all this discussion that we've had on, the issues that we've faced, the sober living homes and the vacation rental part of that. We've taken some of the causal factors, and we're getting them at the source instead of getting them at the end of the line. We're fixing them at the source, and that's, to me, that's a good plan versus, let's hire 10 more cops. Let's fix it at the source so we don't have to hire those 10 more cops. That seems like an absolute better way to do that. One little component in there that we've talked about occasionally, and that is summertime policing, increasing the numbers during the summer. It's there's issues, and it's a difficult thing to do, but if we're writing things down there, and I see Eric and Judy writing some things down, please write that in there also, because I think it's
We've talked about seasonal services as it relates to the summertime. OCSD, we've had those conversations with them. One of the things I can say, when this new overtime model comes out, which will be providing monthly reports to us, we'll have a better understanding of the deployment of those overtime needs. And I know that the lieutenant is open to looking at ways that we can maybe potentially bump up beach patrol, which does provide a really good service when our beaches are so busy. So we agree with all of the points that you're making.
Before we jump off the subject, I for one am excited to hear the song that you four are singing this year. This is tremendously different from what we normally do. Usually we get a budget from the sheriffs, and between city staff and city council, we're looking at how many officers we can cut, and this year we're adding one deputy. And the song that Lori just sang was exactly what I've been singing for the last 2 years. Let's look at what other communities are doing. Let's see what opportunities we have out there. So I for one am 100% on board, and I'm glad we're all on the same page this year. I'm excited.
One of the components that I want to see also with this in what the city can do for prevention is, I think we need to ramp up the Neighborhood Watch program. What can the city do to promote that to our citizens so that it's just not on this crime prevention person, but, we know that the public, eyes on the ground does prevent crime. So we really need to get that ramped up, because I think it's kind of been somewhat inactive. And I think that's something that the police actually, that's a tool that they can use, and whatever we can do to promote that. and get that going. That's what we need to do. Every block should be on it. You know, we should have someone that reports to the police for that. So that's one component I'd like to see added, but I am too happy that we're adding this year, but we were taking kind of a wait and see, and we have components that are coming on. We have the Outlet Mall and Estrella Plaza, and I think last year, if we were going to add a police officer, I think we were in the red on our budget. So it is nice this year that we do have the revenue to do that. So I think it's time. We are seeing the effects of Prop 47 passed in 2015. It's all come to a head, so I think the timing is right.
Okay, and then let me just go back here for a second. You were talking about code enforcement as part of our public safety. So I just want to point out, code enforcement costs are about $900,000 for this coming year. And so that would bump, instead of 44% of our operating budget, it would make public safety about 46%. So about half of our operating budget, if you include code enforcement, is for public safety. 46, not quite half, a little bit lower. Okay, so let's move on. We'll talk about fire services, the third component of our public safety piece. Fire services, $9 million is the total budget. Our base contract with OCFA increases by only 1.4%, $110,000, but the total budget for fire services is increasing by $261,000, or 3%. Part of that is due to the seasonal ambulance service. We discontinued that with OCFA, so obviously that's a reduction in costs. But then we've started a pilot program for a second full-time ambulance. We began that in November 2015. So the budget before you includes funding to continue that program throughout the year. Obviously, we'll be coming back to council. We'll be talking about it, whether that's something you want to do, but we did include the funding for that throughout the year. One thing we want to point out, we've already... someone pointed out, I can't remember who, about the Memorial Care hospital closure that's pending, coming up. So we have been in talks with Orange County Fire Authority about the impact of that, and two of the things that were recommended, one was second full-time ambulance, and so the fact that we have this pilot program in place is going to help with that, and if council chooses to continue that program, that will help with that impact. That's one piece. And the other thing that was recommended was adding a fourth firefighter to Engine 50. Most cities have that fourth firefighter. Ours do not on that particular engine. And so while this is not in our budget this year, there will be something coming back to council during the year, and I just want to talk about this a little bit so that we understand what that impact might be. And so Orange County Fire Authority has applied for a SAFER program grant, and I don't know what SAFER stands for. It's an acronym for something, but it's a FEMA grant, and it would be to add this fourth firefighter on Engine 50. The grant, if we're awarded that grant, will cover the first 2 years. OCFA would get the grant, and that would cover 2 years of funding the fourth firefighter. And let me mention, too, just keep in mind, when we say a fourth firefighter, we're obviously a 24-hour service, and so it's not one firefighter, it's actually 3, because you have to have one for every shift, right? We can't just have it part of the day. If only fires occurred during just an 8-hour period of time, or fires or emergencies, but they occur all day long. So the grant will cover the first 2 years. Then the cost will be phased into the city for years 3 through 7, and it would begin with 3 overtime positions. We wouldn't do a regular funding, and I'll show you a chart on this in just a second. And then we would phase into 3 regular positions by year 8, and the city would bear all costs starting in year 8. So if you look at this chart, this is kind of how it would look. So in year 1, 3 regular positions, total cost, $665, $256 would all be borne by OCFA through the grant in years 1 and 2. Year 3, the overtime positions would be shared, so OCFA would pay a portion and the city would pay a portion. And then you can see the difference in year 4, it kind of flips. Year 5, the city's paying all of it, but it's still overtime positions, and then we move to overtime and regular, and all the way down to the regular positions in year 8. The city bearing the full cost. Important thing here is to remember, none of these are increased by cost increases. So obviously, $665 in year 1 versus $665 will not be $665 in year 8. There will be pay increases and CPI and that type of thing. So we don't know what that number would be, but that would be the impact to our budget long term.
And Judy, excuse me, we've got to do better at negotiating here. This is not fair. It's not. Those first 2 years are FEMA grants. Those don't cost the Orange County Fire Authority a dime. So that shouldn't go in the OCFA cost share column here. We've got to go after them to pick up some of these costs here. This is not fair. This is a regional asset. This asset is used regionally, and the Orange County Fire Authority is a regional fire authority. They're not doing their fair share of this. Too much of this falls on the city of San Clemente, and this isn't fair. So let's go back to the fire authority and ask for better deals, because this is it's not good enough, I don't think.
We'll have some follow-up meetings with John Abel and Lori Zeller as it relates to that. The SAFER grant, from what we were told, wouldn't land until late summer, early fall, so that's kind of the timeframe of when we'd be coming back to council to formalize this, so this gives us some more time to talk to OCFA to see if we can get anything more creative with this cost share.
Well, it needs to be more creative, because this isn't right for us to bear the enormous, those two columns. Then there needs to be a third column in there, and out of that, 1.3 million. So Orange County Fire Authority share, 400,000, City of San Clemente, 2.6 million, federal government, 1.3 million. That's not, those are, we need to work on that a little bit before we
Understood.
put a stamp on it. Thank you.
Okay. So similar chart that we've seen for the city and police, and now here's for fire. The total fire contract starting in '07 at, we've been about the same number of positions for this whole 10 years. The 15 and 16, you'll see them go up to 50, and that's the seasonal, part-time seasonal drivers. So it's a little misleading, because it's not really 8 positions, because it's only part of the year, it's only half-time, but we've discontinued those. So if you kind of look, we've been at about 42 positions for the last 3-4 years, and we were one up before that. If we add these 3, this would move us to 45. Okay, so moving on with community development, our next department, some highlights. Department will be continuing efforts on abating residential and commercial nuisances. We also have an assessment of code enforcement services and planning counter operations that we plan to be completed in the coming year. The budget enhancements include increased administrative staffing, position regrade, and contractual services for code enforcement based on this increased workload that's been going on. We also have an assessment of the Track It system. That's an IT strategic plan project. And what's also in the budget as an enhancement is an annual fee study program. The first year would be the planning division, but the idea would be that each year we would take one of our divisions or departments, and we would do a fee study on that department or division, so that we can make sure to continually be looking at our fees on an annual basis. In our Public Works Department, highlights new capital projects, which you will be getting a CIP presentation in a little while. They total $19.5 million, and new maintenance projects in CIP total $6.3 million. So most of those are managed by Public Works staff and engineers. We also added this year ongoing annual funding for minor maintenance projects. This was part of the LTFP discussion, but $250,000 was added, and the point of that is so that we continue to maintain our infrastructure. We don't want to have to compete every year with other things for all these smaller projects, and if we don't keep it maintained when it needs to be maintained, things start to fall apart, and then it costs a whole lot more on the back end to get it fixed. And so what we're hoping is that this funding can take care of a lot of these small projects so that they don't become bigger projects and bigger cost drains in the future. We also will be continuing the implementation of our Lucidity computerized maintenance management systems with our maintenance departments, as well as continuing in Public Works. And the peer structural rehabilitation budget is included in fiscal 17, $1.2 million in the CIP budget, and you'll be hearing from Ken Natz about that in a little bit.
Before you move off of that,
Yes.
I wanted to give my sincere compliments to the Public Works Department, not shown on this chart, but just a roll call of accomplishments for the last fiscal year. Reconstruction of the El Portal Beach Access Stairway, North Beach Pedestrian Safety Bulb-Out Project, Los Molinos Utility Undergrounding Project, yay, Calle Frontera Avenida La Plata Street Habilitations, Expedited Recycled Conversion Program, water conversion program and completed 10 city sites and customer retrofits of 110 sites. And then they have an equally daunting list ahead. This is big stuff for an old city, and so I just wanted to extend my thanks to the Public Works team.
Can I add one thing while we're on the subject of Public Works?
Yes.
We lost our Street Improvement Assessment District. I believe it ended in beginning of 2012, or in 2012. Council directed staff to monitor the situation with the streets and this fund in 2013. But could we come back in 2017 with an LTFP paper on this, where we kind of look at this and see if maybe there's some way of funding street maintenance so that it's not a hit to the general plan? Or, I'm sorry, to the general fund? So I have general plan on the brain for this year. Because right now, it's 700,000 plus transfer from the general fund to street maintenance, and that was taken care of with this assessment district. If there's a way that we could figure out how to fund it, some source or a way of setting that aside, we would have more money in our general fund that we could use for other items.
So to that point, I've had a discussion with our Assistant Deputy Director, Tom Vonnegut. The street assessment that we had went away in fiscal year 2011. We did do an LTFP in 2013 and brought back some of the obstacles that were in front of us at that time, specifically Prop 218, if we were to bring something back. So I think what I hear you saying is, can we revisit it to make sure nothing's changed since the 2013? Because when it expired, we basically lost that $700,000 contribution to the general fund to help with our street programs. And so it'd be nice to be able to have an outside source supplement that, so we'd have $700,000 to devote elsewhere in the city. And so we can definitely look at that as part of the next LTFP.
Okay, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
But part of that is the ongoing, we have an ongoing assessment program for our streets, and Mr. Cameron gives us a report on that once a year, do you not, Bill?
Maybe I could help on this.
Okay.
Actually, the general fund of the city was a part of the citywide street maintenance assessment district since 1995. The city council back then allocated, I think it was about $450,000 a year out of the general fund, which grew at a 3% rate because of inflation, up to the $750,000 now. So that didn't start in 2013. It's been happening since 1995 to help the city catch up its backlog on its streets. And we did lose $700,000, so that just means we've lost $700,000 that we could have spent in addition to what we are now. Does that help at all?
But talk about your assessment of the streets, how often we do that? And,
oh, we do that every 2 or 3 years. We actually assess the quality of the streets, and we're doing that now. So we'll be able to come back to the council with a report on where we stand. And our staff's doing a great job here, got some creative ways, and they've figured out ways that we can actually do the rehabilitation less expensively than we were in the past. So I have to give them a lot of gratitude from everyone in the community.
Well, Kathy, how about as part of Bill's report, when that comes back to us, that we get to talk about funding ideas? Is that all right, versus starting a whole new issue here?
We're just we could do that.
It's just a
Otherwise, it was just looking at it through our financial planning process. But.
Well, how about if we wait for Bill's report to come back on the streets, and as part of that, if there's additional funds required, he'll look for some ideas on doing that. If there's not, we'll keep going. No?
I was looking for a permanent funding source. It's like what we had with the assessment district. We had extra money coming in and we were doing more streets. And the reason we were doing that is the city did not have the funds to maintain the streets and they were getting bad. Right. And so I think what you're supposed to do is come to us and tell us whether we're keeping up on that or we're starting to fall behind.
Correct, and we will be bringing that back to you. And we lost our funding source. Prop 218 made it much more difficult for cities to do assessment districts, and that's what caused us to lose that source.
Okay.
And
so
we haven't found another way to replenish that.
Okay. Well, I guess if we get to the point where we're starting to go the other way, where the streets are really declining, then we'll have to look at that. Okay.
Well, as part of his report, he'll talk about that, and that's, all right?
Okay. So we'll move on, our final department, oh, well, actually, it's not, but anyway, Beaches, Parks, and Recreation. We want to mention that we're estimating summer 2016 for the opening of the Ole Hansen Beach Club. And so we've added contractual services and staffing. You had already seen just a quarter time for part-time benefited staff addition, and then hourly staffing that we've added back to, for the opening of that facility. Our budget also reflects 7 aquatics and sports partnerships. I believe there's 6 aquatics ones and 1 sports partnership. And then the enhancements, we plan on looking at the recreation management software. We're looking at a replacement for registrations and programs. That's part of the IT strategic plan. And this is currently the class system. You may have heard us talk about that. That particular item or particular product will not be supported any longer from the I'm saying manufacturer, but the company that produces it, and so we have to come up with a new solution. That company does have other products, and so that's part of what's going to happen in the IT strategic plan is a review of that software and a replacement. And then the golf course, there's a rotary mower replacement that's also in the budget. Something that I think this was just brought to you at our last council meeting was talking about Ole Hansen Beach Club, and so I just want to reiterate these are currently, as of now, these were the hours that were proposed, and so this is what's budgeted is to staff and provide services during these hours. So Ole Hansen Beach Club, that's about 33 hours per week, and the San Clemente Aquatic Center, 72 to 76 hours per week. And so in addition to this, on the off hours, the facilities will be used outside of the normal hours to be staffed with reservations and contractor services. Okay, so if you look, so that's all the general fund departments, and so if you look at the fund balance, this is where we talked about, if you look at the beginning fund balance in the first column, this is what the structure that we've had for the past several years. We had a sustainability reserve of 10 million, our emergency reserve, and then we had a pension reserve and unassigned fund balance. What we're looking to do, as we talked about in LTFP, we're going to discontinue the sustainability reserve, eliminate that, but we're adding to the emergency reserve so that it now represents 20% of our operating expenditures as opposed to it used to represent 9%. So the majority of the sustainability reserve is going to the emergency reserve, and then as we talked about our pension reserve, we're looking to pay down unfunded liability on one of our pension plans. So at the end of 17, we would have 14 million in unassigned fund balance. And I did want to report back during the LTFP, when we talked about doing this, there was a concern about our AAA bond rating and Standard & Poor's and, you know, what would happen there. And so I did talk with them, went through a few things with them, and what I found out is that, first of all, our AAA rating was reaffirmed in 2015, so we still have that rating, and what it was based on is an available fund balance greater than 15%. 15% is considered very strong. If it's over 30%, you get extra points for that. Now, when they look at available fund balance, not only are they looking at these restricted amounts that you have here, the unassigned and the emergency fund, but they're also looking at unassigned, assigned, and assigned fund balances. So what that means is that we would, because we're saying for the emergency reserve, we'd have it at 20%, we'd always be above that 15 that is considered very strong. In addition, if you take the other funds, if, you know, being up to 30 would not be that much of a stretch. We were at 43% in 2015. And so what it boils down to in a nutshell is it didn't really matter what you're calling the reserve. It's a matter of how much you have on hand to be able to fund emergency situations. And so while they could not tell us definitively this will or will not impact, because they can't say that without looking at your whole, looking at everything, they did assure me that it's not based on the type of reserve, but it's based on the total dollars. And a couple other things I just want to point out, they said that having a formal, well-defined policy also gets you extra points, and us having that policy and it being in our policy that, you know, this is a reserve, it's 20%, it's based on operating expenditures, that helped us, as well as when we have larger operating positions, that's also a help as well, because that's considered also funding that you can use when an emergency occurs. So I just wanted to point that out before we went on.
Okay, so this was my second big one. On page 40 of your financial review, you say, quote, according to Standard & Poor's, in our view, financially, the city has performed very well in recent years and has maintained an unreserved fund balance of more than 40% of expenditures. Okay, I need to see a chart that they refer to here to get to that 40%. I
Okay.
understand everything you just said, that it sort of kind of doesn't matter, but to me it does.
Okay.
And so if they have categories that add up to 40% of our expenditures, I want to know what those are.
Okay,
Is that going to be easy to put together?
yes. I mean, well,
Okay,
easy. I don't know,
because
easy, I can put it together.
20% on this chart versus the 40% they're looking at, how we measure is how we manage, and if they're looking at something that adds up to 40%, it's really important that we understand what that looks like.
Right, and that's what I was mentioning before. It's not just these, but it's also the assigned fund balances.
Right, so I
which-
just want to see a
what
one
those are.
sheet that adds up to the 40%, and ideally, you call them up and say, can we see your analysis? And because it's so easy, we have rock star financial people in San Clemente. However, in other cities, it's very easy to move money from one cookie jar to another cookie jar, and a little bit here and a little bit there, and pretty soon, you're talking about real money. So this is an important place for discipline. And then on a related note, are we going to get to policy later? Reserve policy, or?
No, I mean, there wasn't anything in the budget.
Okay,
we
maybe
were
I'll
gonna
save
talk
it
about.
for general questions at the
Okay.
end. But,
Okay.
so my very specific request is on page 40, there's a quote here, I'd like to see the chart they used to conclude that we have 40% of our expenditures maintained in a fund balance.
And it's actually more than 40, so I think at that time it was actually even 50%, so they were using 40 as a more than, but it's greater than that. But yes, I will get you that information.
Thank you.
Okay.
And is acceptable, Councilmember Doncheck, that when we come back for the adopted budget on June 13th, we can have a slide that brings that in
Sure.
front to show you?
But
and
if you
give
get it sooner and you want
Oh,
to send it by
absolutely.
email, that would be
Absolutely.
great too, just so I don't waste everybody else's time.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. So this is it's an updated 5-year yes, you have a question? We go back?
Is that number we're looking for 14 million divided by 65 million approximately?
Where are you seeing 14?
14 million is the reserve, and 65 million is general fund expenditures.
So actually, it's the number above it, it's the 11.4, so because we're saying 20% of the emergency reserve. So the unassigned fund balance at 2.6 would be on top of that. So that's
Okay.
the first thing, it's the 11.4 is the top number in that equation. The bottom number is not the 65.5, it's the operating budget. So that's the 59.8, I believe it is. Am I making sense?
Yeah, but that's not going to be 20%, that's a little under 20%. So, must be something else in there. All right, we'll hear more on it later.
Yeah. Jake, go.
The 57 million times 20% gets you to the 11,400,000,
And the 57 is the,
the operating expenditures for the general fund.
okay, so I said 59, it's 57. That's right. Can you tell me what page in the budget the operating chart is?
Page 32, well, the operating chart that shows revenue and expenditures is page 32. And 33.
In fact, we'll go back here. I'm going to go all the way back. So it's right there. So there's the 57 in operating expenditures, and this is rounded, obviously. So if you take 20% of that, that's 11.4. Yep. Sorry, now I got to flip all the way back. Okay. So here's our general fund 5-year forecast, and this is, I'm going to say updated, but it's really just updated for the decisions we've made in 17. So you saw this originally at the LTFP, so if you look at 2017, oh, well, there was operating expenditures right there, I could have gone here. The .8 million is that 752,000, rounded to 0.8 million. So for fiscal year 18, using the same assumptions we had in the LTFP, we're looking at a 0.2, so our operating surplus would go down. And then in 19, 20, and 21, we're looking at deficits. Now, has been pointed out before, these deficits won't actually happen. We will make adjustments. And has also been pointed out, we're very conservative here. And so we assume the highest contract increases for our police and fire services, which may not happen. And then for our revenues, we assume growth, but we try and be conservative with that growth. And so when you have a conservative revenue growth and then less, and then higher expenditure increases, you start to see these deficits. I think the important thing to point out here when we talked about adding the fourth firefighter or adding new police services or adding positions at all, adding anything to our budget, it starts to impact this even more. So not only in 5 years from now we have to kind of come up with 1.3 million, but maybe another 700,000 for a fourth firefighter, maybe another 500,000 for police. So those numbers get harder to sustain, unless our revenues continue to grow, and we only have so many ways that our revenue can grow. Property tax, sales tax, there's not a lot of, there's not that many ways for it to grow. So just wanted to make sure to point that out.
And one thing to Councilmember Donchek's point with a potential, master plan for public safety looking out 5 years, one of the things that we obviously haven't been able to get our arms around is the MOU increases that public safety has taken on, whether it be OCFA or OCSD. As Judy mentioned, when we do our long-term financial plan, we project a 4% increase as part of our 5-year projection, which these numbers are reflected with. But the last 2 years, we've seen kind of an unusual trend where they've been above 4%, and that's something that, we want to be kind of in the conservative range and not jump to like 6 or 7% in our forecast for salary and wages, because that would obviously really magnify this deficit forecast. And so that's one hard part that, we want to get our arms around and work with both of them on how we can maintain those costs.
Okay, so we've been focused on the general fund for the most part, so I just, we don't want to forget that we have other funds as well that council is approving when we adopt the budget. And so just some highlights, and that's it for some of these other funds. So our enterprise funds, which are mostly our water and utility funds, as well as storm drain, solid waste, golf, and those you see here. So water and sewer, the proposed budget includes rate increases for water at 4% and sewer at 2%. We just had a public hearing last week presenting those possible rating or potential rate increases. We do have had significant budget impacts due to drought, as you're well aware, and the water and sewer, there are cost of service studies are estimated to be completed in 17. So the water study is already funded. The sewer cost of service study is funded as a budget enhancement in the coming budget. A couple other enhancements, water conservation programs, about $270,000 of the money that we've received for penalties for drought are scheduled as part of a water conservation programs. About $200,000 of that would be rebates in various forms, and there's some other educational component to that as well. Clean Ocean Fund, just want to point out there the $3.5 million total operating budget in Clean Ocean, and that includes reserve transfer. And then one of the big items there is Poche watershed activities in the CIP, and that's about $550,000, and that's from the reserve fund for Clean Ocean.
Yeah, can we stop there for one second? I see Mr. Bonnegat dying to speak in the back there.
He's rushing up here, right?
Tom, would you give us a little recap on the Clean Ocean Fund and what we do with all that money that we collect to try and keep our ocean clean?
Sure. Just to recap, anything specific or just overview?
Well, 3.5 million specifics, I guess, would be.
A good way to help me help you understand, there's a little bit more detail on your budget book in page 163. So there's categories in there. I'll just give, again, a high-level overview, and I'll go as deep as you want to go. There are a number of categories where the Clean Ocean revenue goes into. So you'll see the top of that sheet, if you're going there, is Clean Ocean Fund. It says Operating Division Summary. And then about halfway down, it says Category Expenditures. It starts with personnel there. So in the program funded by that fee, we have had almost 3.5 FTEs, 3.5 staff. This year going forward, we're proposing 2. We will leave 1, as Judy mentioned, code officer vacant, and we're going to try a new approach there. That's that line item. Supplies are things like outreach materials, where we do direct online media campaigns, print advertising, giveaways for the outreach events. Some of the bigger line items there are contractual services. That's a very large one there. So about half of that, a little bit more, that is our street sweeping and enforcement program, and that's the $615,000 number from the program summary. That's included in contractual. And other examples of contractual services besides street sweeping are obligations we have. For example, the operation of the Poche treatment system. We have a long-term agreement with the county, so by agreement, we're on the hook for up to about $190,000 a year for that. We've never reached that, but I budget that just in case. We do annual water quality monitoring and flow monitoring in our channels. We have as-needed contracts to comply with our total maximum daily load and comprehensive load reduction plan monitoring from regional board requirements, so that's example of contractual services. We also have falconry comes out of that item, the falconry at Poche Beach. Other charges, the key costs in there, we have to pay the state a fee to have a permit, so we get to pay them to be regulated, and we also pay the county a share. So they do a number of activities in our water quality program on our behalf and behalf of the member cities. And then interfund transfers is large this year, particularly because that takes care of the, we have a proposed CIP budget that's in the capital improvement program of $500,000 to pursue a permanent roof over our material storage bins down at the maintenance yard. And then we do a transfer also to what we call the Poche watershed activities, and there are several activities we're planning on pursuing. We'll likely come back through the Coastal Advisory Committee and you before we pull the trigger on those, but examples would be design and potential construction of a bioswale on the MO1 channel, a potential diversion of the Poche treated water. Instead of sending it out to the ocean, we'll put it into the land outfall, and we're looking into what that means, if that's better or worse for the pond and getting rid of it. And then there is a small amount, there was an idea to do some seasonal sand pushing and moving to get rid of the pond, but that might not be favorable to the regulatory agencies. So that's where all this clean ocean revenue is going. It's basically a number of activities, inspections, enforcement, outreach projects to help us meet our regulatory requirements and keep postings at a minimum to keep our water quality up at the ocean.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, Tom.
Sure.
Okay. Our special revenue funds, you can see there's 4 funds here. We'll talk about street improvement fund. We actually talked a little bit about that. Measure M2 funds provide ongoing revenue source, and we also have an annual general fund transfer of $756,290 to the penny. We're continuing that into fiscal 17. Our miscellaneous grant fund, we have $130,000 for sidewalk improvements included there through our CDBG program. During our CIP presentation, you'll hear more about sidewalks. Gas tax fund, there's 8 projects there totaling $2.5 million for 17. And then we have a police grants fund, which continues to fund a portion of 1 deputy position. Each year, we budget about $100,000 for that grant. And so our total police contract, $100,000 of that is paid through this police grant fund for a deputy we added many years ago that was funded through this. Our internal service funds, just some highlights here. Our general liability fund, the city continues to participate with the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority. Our liability insurance premium is budgeted at $1.85 million for, it's fiscal 17. That was pointed out to me and I forgot to change it. So for next year for fiscal 17. Fleet replacement, there's just 4 pieces of fleet equipment budgeted for next year replacement, $160,960. In our central services fund, we have a budget enhancement there, our CRM notification system. That's another IT strategic plan project. And then our information technology fund, several budget enhancements, a network infrastructure upgrade, a telephone system replacement, and security enhancements, again, all part of the IT strategic plan. Those guys are going to be busy next year. Okay, and then finally, our debt service fund highlights. Negotiable Debt Service Fund, the general fund transfer was suspended in fiscal 2014, and we have lease income that covers the building operational costs and debt service payments and continues to cover those. So that includes this portion of my presentation. We will be moving on to the capital improvement program. I don't know if you want us to continue on that or you want to take a break at this time. It's kind of, this piece is a little bit longer.
We were thinking we could take a quick break before we go into this pretty long capital improvement. I know there's a lot of questions, and then we could start the public hearing, but it's, I defer to the council.
Could I ask my policy question then before we
course.
pivot off of this? Okay. I'm on page 294, and the fund balance and reserve policies are there, and they've changed to be consistent with discussions we've been having.
Yes.
So, my first question is, under the enterprise funds, on page 159, you list them right here.
Yes.
And then in the comment section, Clean Ocean doesn't make the cut. Is that because it's a different animal, because it's a voter-approved fund, or is that an oversight? That
It's not an oversight. I don't believe we have a policy for Clean Ocean because it's more of a revenue going out. It's not a,
But yet, on this chart, it's an enterprise fund.
it is an
right?
enterprise fund, but this is regarding whether we have reserves for it. I don't think we've ever had a reserve requirement in the Clean Ocean Fund.
Okay.
It's just not that kind of,
No, I know it's not. So
yeah, if we don't have any money there, we just don't do the activities, right? If none of the funds came in, whereas water and sewer.
Okay, and then this is a question for my colleagues. I'm looking for language here that somehow sounds like this. These funds are not to be accessed to fund new programs or capital projects, new capital projects. And I'm also looking for language, any spent funds are to be replaced within, pick a time, 24 months, 36 months of allocation. I'm trying to sharpen up this policy to protect the family jewels. Because the logic, if you do any reading on this, it's easy to come up with some new project that needs to be done and call it in service to economic downturn or an emergency expense. And I think the spirit of this is, if we were tapping on this, it would be because we can't do what's already on our plate.
Didn't we have this discussion in our long-term financial plan, and didn't we decide that we had sufficient language in here and there was sufficient understanding that this is an emergency fund? I
But it's
kind of remember that.
We did have a discussion. That's when I was trying to create two different, I failed on that. But regardless of failing on the idea of having the two different funds, I wanted the sustainability fund and an emergency fund, and we didn't end up there. Still, regardless of that, I think it's a stronger policy if we specify the funds can't be accessed to fund new programs. And also that we make a statement about an expectation that if the funds are depleted, they better be refurbished. So, and I feel pretty strongly about it. And persistence is a good quality.
I don't know how to say this, but I thought we decided we had sufficient safeguards in here so that wouldn't happen. I thought we had sufficient language and verbiage in here to cover that.
And I'm not seeing it, and I'm looking at Placentia, and I'm looking at that.
Placentia was against, that's
but I'm looking
theft.
at-
People are going to jail for that.
No, but I'm looking at Beaumont, and I'm looking at.
They're going to jail too,
Right,
by the way.
right. So, but that's what the rules are for, to give people lines in the sand.
I think
So-
that if we were to discuss, this is a larger policy discussion, I think if we want to agendize this for a meeting, for a council meeting in terms of fiscal policy and deliberation, I don't know if this is the right venue in terms of this year's
But
budget.
it totally is, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, some money decisions have been made that we're going to be asked to approve in the budget based on this change. This is a different policy than last year.
Yeah, but this is money we're not touching. This
I
is
know, so I
not.
just want it in writing, don't touch it.
Well, it is in writing, don't touch it, unless you have, all these other
So your concern is...
Essential service programs and
Let
funding.
me come at it differently. What does it hurt to add the language, these funds are not to be accessed to fund new programs? And spent funds are to be replaced within, it doesn't damage the policy.
Whatever we do add, or however we amend it, has to be done very carefully, because one of the things that's been very challenging for me is 30 years ago when they drafted the beach parking fund, and the way they constructed the language from that and the way that he's utilized handcuffed councils to be able to use it in actual areas of need for years, and ultimately it ended up being so difficult to spend, it became very problematic. And so words do matter. I understand your concern. I guess the heart of it is what you see is a council or a city management that would be too reckless, or would maybe, because that's really the heart of it, is that if we have to literally write down every operational contingency that has to be obeyed in case of debiting into these funds, we couldn't cover that spectrum if we tried. And if we did, we would do it in a way that would handcuff or potentially have some blowback. So, and I think also we have to do this in concert with the general fund too, because we put in budgeting and best practice components into the general plan that should be.
I don't know that that's relevant to this,
but it does, because it mandates long-term financial planning components, budgeting. There's a whole area on fiscal policy.
So if you're
in
a
the general
no,
plan.
you're a no. But what I'm trying to do, and I know once again, this money is different from all the rest of the money. This is the money that gets us the AAA bond rating. This is the money that becomes really tempting during a recession to go after, and it's what makes San Clemente so financially strong. And since we're changing it, it hasn't been changed for years, this is the year it's being changed, I'm looking at that as an opportunity to add a little more specificity to it. So,
I'm having deja vu. We had the same conversation, I don't know how long ago, and it's
no, it was a
very
different
eerily
conversation.
similar.
It was, it's when I wanted to have two funds, I
Okay.
wanted to distinguish
I'm
between the
prepared
Just
to
so I
move
can-
on to the break, and then we can
It's
talk
all right,
about
just so
capital improvements.
that I want to make sure that we're considering this in due course. So what exactly are you proposing here, so that we can be very clear?
two different thoughts. One is to specify these funds are not to be accessed to fund new programs. And secondly, that any spent funds are replaced within, and I don't care if it's 36 months, 24 months, but time certain of allocation.
Funds can't, so when you say ongoing programs, what would be?
No, I didn't say, I said new programs.
New programs. What does that mean, new program?
Okay, that would mean, let's go with Councilmember Ward's street improvement. Oh, we need to replace some streets because there's an emergency. And that would be outside the work plan.
I don't think we need to have this discussion, but the bottom line is, under the rules that you just implied, so we could pull the money out if we're going to replace it within 36 months to do her street improvement project?
No, it's two different thoughts.
It's two different thoughts.
These are two different thoughts. One is a replacement thought,
Okay.
and the other is an idea that this is to protect what exists rather than create new things. So,
I think you could, here's what I'd say, is that I do like the thought of a replenishment policy, although I don't want to add a time fuse to it, as you never know what a downturn is, and 36 months from now, is the council going to be going out and borrowing money and bonding themselves to repay a fund because a previous council had said this? I think that you could put something there that says the primary purpose of these reserves is to protect funds during periods of downturn, and that the fund balance should be replenished as soon as financially possible. Something like that adds an urgency or a overriding policy.
would it work for you if it were best efforts
That's fine.
would be made within 3 years?
Oh, I don't want to
We've
put the time
we've
fuse on
already
it.
got all this stuff in here. If we want to discuss this, let's have city staff prepare an agenda item for us, and let's talk about it at length.
We have talked about it at length, and I'm just coming back one more time saying that I really think it's a better policy if,
I just don't know by saying 36 months, is there some best practice behind 36 months as opposed to 24 or 48 or 60 or 12? I think philosophically, I agree with you, that we should maybe say there should be a bookend and a replenishment, because you can't perpetually be in a state of emergency. But I certainly don't want to add a hard stop to it so that we basically handcuff future councils into doing something dumb that they shouldn't have to do, particularly when things may be already in a period of stress. So I think you can find a philosophical common ground behind it, but I just don't know if the timing is.
Well, and this gets to my other point, which I failed on last time, so I have failed, is I think a supermajority should be needed to change policy. So, but, you know, so you're talking about this dumb hypothetical council in the future. They could just change the policy if they wanted the 36 months out of it. I'm just saying, in today's reality, I think it's good policy, but I understand I don't have support for this idea, so I'll drop it.
I don't think there's anything wrong with putting a bookend on there and saying that you should use best efforts to replenish this fund as soon as a period of economic downturn, anticipated expenses, and these items conclude. I just don't know about picking some future date and then, you know, and then doing that.
But Tim, it already says that, because it says the city will maintain an emergency reserve equal to 20% of operating expenditures. So if your emergency reserves fall below that, it says you will maintain emergency reserves. So this already says you have to replace it. I mean, you will maintain.
The punishment is you don't get a check mark, the way it's set up right now. The punishment is if it's not maintained. See, like, there's no little check mark next to the second paragraph because that hasn't happened yet. So that's not much of a consequence. I'm fine. I hear that I don't have 3 votes.
Okay, so, all right, what's next up?
If I was going to recommend we take a break and then we come back and do the CIP and the public hearing.
Okay, 20 minutes enough?
How many?
20 minutes enough?
All right.
Okay? Is that all right? 20 minutes.
What do we need? We need
10
20.
of.
What do we need 20 for?
15?
I eat very quickly.
Okay?
15 is good.
Quarter of.
There we go.
Okay, welcome back. We'll reconvene the meeting, and Mr. Nats, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Baker, honorable council members. Ken Nats, I'll be discussing the capital program this evening. The presentation is divided up into two specific sections. We'll do a quick highlight reel of 2016 in about a minute, just show you some photos of the work that we've been doing, some of the money previously allocated, show you how it's being spent, show you those improvements for the community. And then we'll dive into the proposed fiscal year 17 budget. We'll look at all the listings of the projects. We'll look how the projects are categorized in our 6 major categories. And then we have a highlight reel of those as well. And then obviously we'll answer any questions or comments the council has on the projects. So jumping right in, there's a total of 128 projects in the current fiscal year 16 program for a total of $51.2 million. 81 of those projects are capital, 47 of those projects are maintenance and or study. The big distinguisher between those projects is a capital project replaces more than half of an asset's depreciable life. So in a maintenance project, it doesn't replace half of its life. That's the definition, just as a reminder. So jumping into the highlight reel, we've done a lot of improvements in the form of beach accesses, coastal accesses, I should say, and then also improvements to mobility in our right-of-ways at North Beach, as well as some sidewalks, facility improvements for the community, improvements in our transportation network. This one is really interesting. As you notice, the underground power lines are down in this particular slide in the before and after. So not only a street improvement, but a nice improvement in aesthetics for the community. Obviously, taking care of the environment with recycled water and trying to conserve water. A lot of parks and community facilities were upgraded with recycled water. And then obviously improvements to convey that recycled water. And then collect stormwater. And then obviously, finally, treat water. So a lot of things going on in the city. And then we're going to jump right into the fiscal year 17 budget. We have a total of 46 projects for a total of 19.5. The slide shows the distribution of those projects. As you can see, it's heavily weighted this year, $8.3 million on streets. We'll touch upon a couple of these here throughout the presentation. This is the listing of all the projects that are in the CIP. I'll refer the council to page 196 and 197 of the budget book, which has all these projects listed. I'm sorry, it looks like it got skewed a little from the final draft, but the budget book does show those projects listed out. And I'm just going to touch upon a few of these here as we go through. Please ask questions or stop me whenever you need to. Big one this year, last time we rehabilitated the pier was in 2011. The project's currently under design. $1.2 million is allocated from the general fund or proposed to construct the project. That project's expected to be constructed sometime between the fall and the winter and the spring and be delivered prior to next summer. This photo here with the waves comes from 2010, 2011 project. Actually, the scaffolding was out there when this picture was taken, which is amazing. It still stayed up. More community improvements. Bathrooms and parks being rehabilitated. This was to touch upon some of the deferred maintenance that we touched upon in the LTFP. There's a lot of facilities out there that have deferred maintenance over the years. You can see some of the examples in these photos. This particular project, or projects I should say, is $400,000 per restroom funded from the general fund. And it's intended to either replace the entire restroom because they don't meet code and they're so beyond being able to be repaired that we just need to replace them altogether. There is an opportunity to potentially come in with a precast restroom. That one up in the corner is that facility. We're working with the planners to figure out if it meets the aesthetic requirements of the city. And those projects would be a little bit cheaper than a traditional brick and mortar design, bid, build construction project.
Ken, I got a question for you. Does Porta Potty make one with red tile roofs anywhere?
You know,
maybe we should start designing those. Make millions.
Duly noted. And you'll notice the pages there that are a little skewed there. Page 244, this one. Downtown bike racks, 40 of these are proposed throughout the city. The locations are shown on the map. Nice aesthetic design. I think the first ones are going to go in at Ole Hansen Beach Club, I believe. That's correct. Moving right along, a lot of street rehabilitation projects. I'm sorry, it looks like some of this got a little bit skewed on the screen. Anyhow, this shows kind of a major listing of projects for both sidewalks as well as streets. The lower four, Concordia, Shorecliffs, Boca, Puente, are all sidewalk improvement projects. If you combine the totals of all those projects, you get approximately 3,200 lineal feet of new sidewalk. And then with respect to the street improvements, the rehabs, those obviously are paving rehabs, but they also include the, the evaluation and the realignment of striping configuration, similar to what we've done in the past couple years with buffered bike lanes and looking really at the complete street concept. So those totals of 4.07 million.
Ken, before you leave that, what's that picture of?
It's just a generic picture of just street and right of way. Complete streets, I think, is the concept. New storm drains as well going into the city, proposed from the storm drain fund. The yellow depicts the new storm drain lines that we're going to be putting in or proposed to put in. Total of $700,000 from the storm drain fund. That big building is the DMV there off Cascadita. More underground infrastructure projects. The council recently awarded phase 1 of this project up in Highland Light. That phase includes a smaller portion of the work, but you can see here on the yellow it depicts all of the ductile iron pipelines that need to be replaced. In fact, the photos there of the existing pipelines, that is a photo from that development that shows the corrosion of the pipe, so you can kind of see what we're dealing with. And there's approximately 10,000 lineal feet of pipe out in that development. So, big job, big number, 2.5 million from the Water Depreciation Fund.
And a great photo too, by the way.
You know, I'll give a little plug to Lucity. Actually, we used the Lucity database to generate that diagram there with the aerial, and that was because we have the smart technology of having the database feeding the maps. So there's more of that to come with some of the technology that we've been able to roll out with the integration of Lucity and the Geographic Information System maps.
It's on my list of things to ask Mr. Nats about this evening is an update on Lucity. So good start there. We'll hear more about that, I'm sure.
No problem. Obviously, always something going on in the treatment plant, odor control systems replacement. We've been upgrading a lot of the treatment plant components. The treatment plant was was constructed in about 90. So we're on that 25-year life cycle. A lot of these technologies are outdated and or the equipment needs to be replaced because it's at the end of its useful life. In this particular project, it's a proposed budget of $1.5 million from the Sewer Depreciation Fund. That shows a picture of the existing scrubber tower that we have. See if I can bring that back, Laura. I think I just pushed the wrong button. And that scrubber tower is located right where that green dot is, just in case you didn't know. So there's new technologies out there, different chemicals, lower profiles. The whole concept here is to reduce the odors around the treatment plant. If you're out there in the mornings when the wind's blowing in the right direction, you've smelled it. So we're hoping the new technologies can really address some of these concerns with the new neighbors, as well as lower the profile of the treatment plant, and then save us on chemical cost, because the new technologies allow us not to have to use so many chemicals, and that's really a big cost in treating odor.
Ken, what is the new technology that you're talking about here? What is it? Just different chemicals, or?
I don't know all the details, Mayor Baker. We recently issued a request for proposal, and we have a couple consultants that have submitted. So we're going to be bringing something back into the council early July to award a concept project. We don't, we're not experts in the technology. That's why we need to bring some consultants on board. But there are different chemicals and different strategies.
I'll be looking forward to that report then. Thanks.
That should be coming forward in around June or August.
Okay.
Or July or August, excuse me. $1.5 million from the Sewer Depreciation Fund. And then another project here, the treatment plant, the Los Molinos generator. That's at that far corner of the treatment plant at the green dot. You're going to see more of these. You've seen some of these in the last couple years. What it is our generators, there's a sunset on some of the emission requirements. Although the generators still perform and can operate, they don't meet emission standards. And that emission standard has to do with nitrogen oxide. And some of these older generators just can't meet that requirement. So in order to be in compliance with the California Air Resources Board, we've got to spend some money to keep ourselves in compliance. Otherwise, we pay fines.
Can we send the old ones up to Sacramento?
I think they ship them down to Mexico and run them in Tijuana.
What you said hurt because it's true. That's what made that so painful.
We can sell it as surplus property, which that's what we would propose to do when we do replace the generator. $260,000 from the sewer depreciation fund, and then we're going to jump right into the maintenance program. Again, smaller projects don't extend the depreciable life of the asset, but really just kind of help clean it up and make it usable for the community. Quick listing, I have a couple highlights. Council's seen a lot of these projects. We have a lot of usual suspects. This is where the slurry seal, the major maintenance. But let's talk about the new one. This one was a big discussion in the LTFP, the North Beach Opportunistic Sand Replenishment. This project proposes to bring in dredge material from the Santa Ana River and put it on the beach to restore the beach. A total of $455,000 from the general fund is proposed to realize that project. Moving right along, this one also came out of the LTFP, this maintenance services rehab. This is somewhat similar to the street improvement program, or the concept of having some funds set aside that the subject matter experts can spend on this lower hanging fruit to again prevent the deterioration of the assets so they can be repaired and not have to be replaced a few years away.
Does JPIA help you with deciding what kind of rehabilitation should be done? Because all those visuals you have up there, are potentially improvements would make them safer. Do you have any guidance from the insurance authority on how to set priorities on how to use that money?
I'm not aware of any, but I'll defer to staff.
Or if you don't, you might want to check in with them, because
Okay.
they do offer that to cities in terms of, fixing the fence is more important than fixing the roof, or whatever your list might look like.
Thank you, we'll look into that. So that's $250,000 from the general fund. I'm sorry, I skipped right ahead. And then I like to call these the usual suspects. This is what I was alluding to. Sewer maintenance, that this addresses a multitude of various projects: raising manholes to grade, rehabbing manholes, lining pipes, replacing valves at the treatment plant, numerous things that go on as a result of just having old assets in the system. Similar with the water system, $300,000 from the water depreciation reserve. And then the major maintenance, sidewalk repair and slurry seal. This is $950,000 from the general fund. This is, nothing new to the council. This is just to kind of continue, trying to improve the community and make sure that the infrastructure is maintained in an adequate way so the community can use it and feel safe. And that concludes the discussion on the CIP, and to be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
I have a question and a potential request. It's coming up in FY 218. You've got about $1 million of beach trail bridge maintenance ahead of us. Would you be able to give me a summary of what it costs to maintain the beach trail annually? A comprehensive list that would include the beach access components to it, the bridges, any erosion correction that has to be made, vandalism. I'm just curious, and that may be in here and I just didn't find it, but that amenity is so valuable to the city, but I have a feeling it's a very expensive resource to keep the way it needs to be kept.
Definitely. I'm sure we can put something together.
Yeah.
This is where the Lucity plug would kind of come back, because really this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that all of our assets are accounted for and they're itemized, and not only that they're itemized, but that the amenities associated with those assets are known. So the beach trail is a great example, because you've got the little doggy bags, and you've got the trash cans, and you've got irrigation systems, and you've got lighting. And so what we've been doing over the last year, and you might have seen some of our interns out there, they're out there with data collectors collecting all of these assets, and they're associating these assets back to what we call the parent asset, which in this case would be the trail. And then, and we're doing that so when we run a report on the trail, we're not only getting the trail, like, oh, we had to go out and clean up erosion, but everything that's below the trail as a child to the trail, and those costs for maintenance will be rolled up into the parent. So powerful technology, takes a lot of
cool.
time. I'm sure we could do something more rudimentary with just, but that's where we're striving to do
Okay.
with every single asset in the city.
And now that you talk about it, I realize there's even drainage going underneath, and there's, there's stairways that are going to need attention. When you do work on the bridges, are they going to be closed? Or do we even know that yet?
I don't think we know. I
Okay.
think.
$1 million is...
Okay, we have staff member here.
Oh.
We're starting on Riviera, the Penn Bridge on
Right.
Riviera Beach on next Tuesday.
Oh.
It will not be closed, and it should be completed by the weekend. We're wet sandblasting with a new device our contractor has, and then he's going to prime it and use marine-grade paint. It should only take about 3 days.
Great.
Then we're moving on to Montalvo.
Okay. And then the big bridge, the boardwalk at the end? Okay, thank you.
Those temporary closed then, Randy, during the...
There is no temporary closure, they stay open.
Yes.
Well, while we're talking, Randy, here, I have a question. When are we actually going to hit the Mariposa Bridge, and are we going to do a complete overhaul of it?
As a, Tom?
Yeah, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Thompson.
No, he doesn't. All right.
I don't know exactly when. The projects that Randy just described here as our maintenance services manager, we're going to test out this new coding system. We think it has a lot of promise, and not only because it will provide a good coding, we can do it quicker while keeping access and people moving across the bridges. And so our goal is to get to the Mariposa Bridge as soon as possible. And those two $500,000 placeholders in the future budgets were some old estimates that I'm hoping we won't get anywhere close to if this new process is successful. That was based on a different approach. So I don't have a great answer other than we want to get through these as soon as possible because they do need some attention. We have had them checked. There's not a safety issue with them, but we recognize they're unsightly and they just need to be taken care of to prevent further deterioration of the coding system. So Riviera we're going to knock out. That looks good. We'll get to Montalvo, and then depending on where we are with that in the summer season, we'll work with our maintenance team and update the city manager as soon as we can get out there. And it might be that we might start doing it in short pieces when we think we can have the least impact on people moving through. Do handrails, maybe work underneath. Mariposa will be a particularly challenging one just because of the location and the access underneath. Montalvo and Riviera, we can get to all the way around the bridge fairly straightforward. So there's going to be a little bit more planning on Mariposa. So again, the short answer is not sure exactly when, but the goal is as soon as possible.
Okay. Then I have a general question for staff off of the maintenance question. So I hear a lot of times from people, residents that have issues with us spending $20 million on CIP budget issues. How much of that money could we reallocate to do towards public safety, if any?
I don't want them saying it. Well, actually, the $19.5 million we have in the budget is one-time money. So if there's a one-time cost for public safety, a building or something, we have a public safety construction fund that we could use, but we couldn't take that money and reallocate it, say, for police officers, because that's an ongoing cost, and we wouldn't be able to pay, continue that into the future if we use one-time money for that.
So the easier answer is zero.
Yes.
And about $3.6 million of that 19.5 is in the general fund. The rest is all other funds that can't be used for public safety.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to segue back to Judy. She's going to introduce the couple decision packages that are part of the capital program.
Oh, sorry, I got one question before you go to Judy. The CRP project that talks about Avenida Vaquero underneath Interstate 5. I heard some discussion that possibly Caltrans was going to foot the bill for the improvements there, since it was some of their big trucks that made the holes in the first place. So would somebody talk about that for a second?
You heard correctly. So we have a project in the proposed budget, and we've discussed this with you before. We left a piece of Avenida Vaquero under the bridge. We didn't do it as part of our street project because we expected that was going to get some abuse from the construction project, so we didn't repave it. But we did both sides of Vaquero, and Caltrans did use Vaquero and Los Mares as an access road, and we did find that Unfortunately, they had trucks that weren't using, we don't think they were using what they were supposed to distribute the load. We've already had that discussion. They agreed that, yes, they did induce some damage on the road, and so we are going to get some reimbursement for some work on Vaquero that's inland of the I-5 bridge. And if you've been down there now, you see the road isn't in great shape, and we're about to pull the trigger on a contract to repair it, and Caltrans is going to help foot the bill for that.
It reminded me of the roads in San Clemente 25 years ago before we did the street improvement district. So anyway, all right, well, I'm good. I'm glad to hear that, so.
Okay, so no further
Anybody else, CIP
questions
questions?
on CIP?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. So the next thing we're going to move into, there are several decision packages that are listed in the budget, but that are listed in the budget book that are actually included in the budget. But there are two that we have brought forward that we are asking council to give us direction on. And if after Tom Frank presents some of this information on these packages, we'll have our public hearing, we'll have other questions, and at the end, we'll ask council to give us some direction on whether you want us to include these or not. And here are the two projects, and as I said, Transportation Engineer Tom Frank will come and talk about them. I do want to point out the first is in the general fund, so it's a smaller project, and that's one-time costs there, so that would be a general fund project. The gas tax fund is the second one, so that $600,000 would come out of a different funding source than the general fund. So, and the information on these in the front of your budget book, you have these yellow sheets. So that's the information on these two projects in more detail, and I'm going to call up Tom Frank, Transportation Engineer.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and honorable council members. I won't repeat what Judy just said on this first slide, but we do have the two packages which we will be reviewing tonight. The first one is the San Clemente Trolley Project, and these projects evolved later on into the budget project, and that's why we're talking about them tonight as a separate item. One correction is that the values that were listed, the $66,000, is not just a one-time cost. There are ongoing costs to be considered for this program. It's a 7-year program. The trolley itself, it's a summertime trolley, and the period would be between Memorial Day and Labor Day, and it would run 3 days a week, starting on Friday noon until 10 at night, Saturday 10 in the morning until 10 at night, and then Sunday from noon until 8 at night. It would tie the Pier Bowl area to Avenida Delmar. The trolley would then, it would be on a circular route with 15-minute increments to try and make it convenient for the users. It would tie the Pier Bowl area with Avenida Delmar, then go down towards North Beach along El Camino Real, go to the North Beach area, and then go up along the Outlet Mall and the Shore Cliffs area. So that would be the route. There's a 10% city match fund required. The first year costs are significantly higher because to make it the least expensive for the city overall, the city would be purchasing 3 trolleys in the first year. Again, the city's contribution is 10% of that capital cost, so our portion would be for the first year, including the marketing and purchasing the trolleys, would be $66,900. The total cost for the city over the 7-year period would be $138,641. So I don't know how much more you want me to get into the weeds on this project, or if you want to ask questions now or hear the other decision package. Mayor?
Anybody have any questions about this?
No, Bob, I'm sure you have some thoughts on the matter, though, if you'd like to.
How would you possibly know that, Jim?
Just a wild guess. Just, you know.
Well, as Councilmember Brown has mentioned, I'm not a big fan of this trolley from the get-go, and I could, when there was a 0 up there in the city cost year, that still didn't make it palatable, because that grant money, I think, should be used on better things than this. I mean, Orange County Transit Authority is taking away our bus lines, and we're getting back a trolley that we can pay for. What happened in San Juan? Tom, are you aware that they stopped their trolley program? What happened over there? Do you know?
I'm not really aware of what the latest status is on their trolley program. I know that they reapplied for some new Project V funds to further study a program, and there's been conversations about trying to connect it with the adjacent communities like Dana Point and ultimately San Clemente, but I haven't really heard the latest.
Okay, well, I'm going to be completely opposed to this funding package myself, so anybody else want to say anything?
Well, I'd like to ask a question of Lori. I think San Juan didn't get any Measure M money on this. Their grant, they didn't get the grant for this. So I'm kind of wondering why, if we are looking ahead to a Tri-City trolley, I don't think they.
There's some misinformation in the system. Okay, in San Juan Capistrano, they had their they didn't. There was. If you'll recall, at the request of the then mayor, as an OCTA rep, I pushed the call for projects forward 2 years so San Clemente could explore a trolley. There wasn't a call for projects that would have given them money for this summer. And so they are not participating with their own budget because they've got other budget priorities. Somehow there's confusion in the system that when their V project is or isn't approved, that it's a Tri-Cities trolley idea, and we need to get that cleared up because the closest stop on our proposed trolley route is about 3 miles from their closest stop. So we need to get that cleared up. But then as for this, it still has to go through 3 layers of approval at OCTA, unless has it come out of TAC yet, Bill? Yeah, so it has to go through TAC, it has to go through the Transit Committee, and then it has to go to the board for funding. The initial indications are very favorable for San Clemente, but, you know, it's not decided till it's decided. But the reason they don't have V funding for this year is there wasn't a call for projects that would have been for this year.
Okay. This wouldn't be the time then, if it's going to go through those other layers, that we would actually talk about the stops. Yeah, streamlining those. I think
within our city? No,
Yeah.
we should.
We should wait.
We should wait because and correct me if I'm wrong, in other cities, the critical path is the fleet. So getting the streetcar procurement or the trolley procurement or whatever that's going to look like, that's going to be staff's biggest challenge.
Okay.
Where it stops would be the next.
Okay.
And I should have added one important piece of information for the public. The first year, even if council chooses to move ahead with the program, the first year is acquiring the vehicles and setting up the program, and the actual summer service wouldn't start until next summer. That's an important part, so people aren't expecting a trolley this summer.
Or do we want to vote on this now, or rather than hear both and then come back?
We had intended to do the decision packages, then take the public hearings, and then come back to deliberate on this. But again, at the purview of the council.
Sure.
Okay, so hearing no further questions. I'll
But
move to
before
the
we
second.
leave this, can somebody call San Juan Capistrano and clear up that confusion about the Tri-Cities
The
trolley?
city manager and I from San Juan Capistrano have spoken about it, and he understands that we're not interested in doing a Tri-Cities trolley at this point.
At this point.
That we're going to do our own trolley, or if the council approves it, we'll do our own trolley service as we've proposed, and then we'll grow it in steps if there's an appetite for it. But I've told him outright on the phone that we're not interested in doing a Tri-City trolley at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody want to talk about the intersection control for Camino Vera Cruz and Costa?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So this project was generated from a complaint from a citizen, and then also received the support from the neighboring school PTAs and principals. And it was to basically evaluate the safety associated with the intersection at Camino Vera Cruz and Costa, and that's at the Forester Ranch Park entrance intersection. And so staff did the evaluation and warrant analysis, and it did actually pass the warrants for intersection control. Now, I want to emphasize that although it passed warrants, it doesn't require that the city install intersection control, but it does justify it if the city chooses to move ahead with further intersection improvements. Intersection control, just to get it out in the open, what we're really talking about is either a traffic signal or a roundabout. And an important part of an METCD update now is that It encourages agencies and cities to fully evaluate a roundabout as a feasible option to determine the most viable intersection control. So we'd recommend doing that along with a typical intersection study, and then determine through the public process which type of intersection control the community would want at this location.
Well, Tom, a part of your study would recommend to the community which of those two would be safer and better.
What we do is pretty much the same process we did for Camino del Rio intersection control, and that community, through those workshops, they then brought forward their community consensus or recommendations to the Planning Commission and Council, and in that project, they did select the roundabout option. And so it's the same community. I'd expect that it may go the same route, but we always want our projects to be community-driven. They seem to be received better that way.
Yeah, we want them to be community-driven, but we also want, if we're going to spend all this money on making an intersection safer, we want to make this intersection the safest we can make.
Right, absolutely, and
okay.
staff will be providing our
Good.
professional recommendations. Yeah.
Tom, how come bulb outs weren't looked at or aren't an option here?
They would be, if they would be as part of the study, actually. So that would be, if we were doing a signalized intersection improvement, we would look at curb extensions or bulb outs.
Gotcha.
So we'll look at both alternatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Welcome.
All right, so this is your own opportunity to open the public hearing and take public comments.
Very good. We've got some cards. If you'd like to speak, folks, please, about any part, anything we've spoken about already or anything at all, please fill out a card and hand it to Joanne or Laura and come and speak. So first up, I'll read these cards. Robert Koff, then Lauren Freeman, then Mary Perdue, and Janelle Papadakis.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your continued support of the San Clemente Village. My name is Bob Koff. I'm the treasurer of the San Clemente Village. And that support has kind of launched us, our grassroots efforts in putting this program together in the city of San Clemente. About a couple of years ago, Councilman Baker gave us the idea, and we've cultivated that idea and used some of your funds to put together some legal advice. We got our nonprofit situation in bed here in San Clemente. We put together a brochure that says who we are and what we're doing in the town. And we also held our first community event in March. The village is a national program. There's 150 villages throughout the United States. The San Clemente Village is one of 60 villages that are in development in California. And we are also the first village in Orange County here in San Clemente. So it's a member-based, volunteer-driven nonprofit for San Clemente residents that are 55 and older. It's a neighbor helping a neighbor system. It's friends helping friends. And it works with community volunteers that provide social services and services that promote wellness and independence and connectedness to the community. Services like transportation and visiting people can make the difference for people to stay in their home and live in their home here in San Clemente. Social and educational services provide a way to stay connected with the community, sharing your talents, learning new things, and making new friends. Our event in March was a tremendous success. Thanks to Tim and Bob for attending that event. At that event, we were able to bring in a lot of volunteers and a lot of people to help us with fundraising, volunteers, social events, and we're well on our way to launching the program in this September. So with your continued support in terms of funding, we hope to launch the program in September, and this will help us achieve our objectives. So thank you very much, and get connected. Join the village. That's scvillage.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koff. What's that? My wife is member number 1, I'm member number 2. Lauren Freeman, and then Mary Perdue.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Freeman, and I'm the case manager with Age Well Senior Services. I am in the office at the Dorothy Visser Senior Center once a week, and I provide in-home assessments, case management, develop care plans, and provide referrals and information to seniors. The main goal of Age Well is to remain independent in your own home, and we do have a lot of referrals from the Meals on Wheels program. I do have some clients that are in the low-income senior housing, and we have some accesses to different grants. So I've provided glasses, Insure, colostomy wafers, emergency response buttons, medical equipment, things like that. Currently, there are 34 clients in San Clemente on case management. 4 of them are over 100. The majority of them are either very low or extremely low income. 10 of them are on Meals on Wheels. I have an average about 30 contacts a month between phone calls, office visits, and going on a home visit. So thank you, the city, for supporting us, and do you have any questions?
I got one comment. I think the Meals on Wheels program, as I've said many times, is a tremendous asset here in San Clemente. And if you know anybody that could possibly use that, it's a tremendous program. I got nothing but great things to say about it. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Perdue, and then Jenel Papadakis, and then Pondo.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. FAM has been serving, as you know, clients and people in San Clemente for 17 years. Last year, we had over 51,000 encounters with people in need in San Clemente. It's amazing. Over 33,000 were San Clemente residents. We had 474 residents who needed financial aid in order to stay on their feet. 96 received rental assistance in order to avoid eviction. 179 received utility assistance in the form of paying a backed bill or in order to keep their services from being turned off. Our rapid rehousing program, we were able to take 16 homeless residents off the street and get them into housing and help pay for that housing and teach them their budgets. As you know, by the time people land at our door, they don't want to come there. It's humbling to have to tell your story to somebody, how you've lost your job and can't find a new job, or you're underemployed, or there's been a death in the family, or somebody's got cancer. And so by the time they land at our door, they are so stressed out that they're typically dealing about 12 points lower than their own IQ. When we listen to their story and help them unpack their finances and help create a budget, we're now engaging the logical side of the brain, and now the hard work begins, where they look at the income versus expenses, and now the bottom line, and decisions have to be made. So we coach them through, they make those tough decisions. We're now picking up 59 fresh rescues a week from grocery stores. Thank you to Sprouts opening. That upped our pickups by 6 a week. And so we pick up the food that would be thrown out. It's no longer sellable, but it's still good and full of great nutrition. And our 150-week volunteers help pick up the food, they help do case management, they help clients with clothing and job search. We currently have 83 homeless families in San Clemente that we're working with. We had over 150, and 55 we've been able to house. Others are in transition. Some are in our Gilchrist house, 7 are in Laura's house, and 1 is in another domestic violence shelter. And we're working with all of them to try to help them land back on their feet. You may or may not know that the federal government came along and said all of the counties in the country, you will no longer get your homeless dollars unless you have something called a coordinated entry system. And so we raised our hand at FAM and said, we'll help with that with the county. And along with other agencies in the county, we started this coordinated entry system with a lot of hard work. We were able to finally, by November, be the representatives for San Clemente, and we've now VI SPDATed 24 chronic homeless. So what does that mean? That means that these people are now in the county's system, and as permanent supportive housing beds are available, they will be able to take those beds. Over 100 people in the county have received those beds. We just got an award from HUD to be able to house 7, so a permanent supportive housing award, which will allow us to use federal dollars to help get these chronic homeless off the street. So we're working hard on it. We have another private funder in the community who wants to come alongside and help a little bit with funds. Uh-oh. Okay, is that okay? All right, 75, is that okay?
I'm fascinated.
I'll only be a few minutes. All right. 75 homeless women were taken off the street and are in Gilchrist House. And in fact, at Gilchrist House, we've been able to take 702 homeless women and children off the street since 2003 and help them get back on their feet. Let's see. We are very, very grateful for the continued partnership with the city. You're helping us help the citizens of San Clemente, and it's our honor to be able to do that. We look for a continued partnership, and we leverage these funds by going out and finding grants. We have community donors who donate their hard-earned funds to us, as well as churches and businesses, along with our 150 weekly volunteers. We get the job done, and again, we're honored to be able to do it, and we look forward to many years of helping people, you know, stay on their feet, get off the streets, and keep our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And I got to say, there's another fabulous organization in town. San Clemente's lucky to have FAM. Nothing but great reviews from everybody that's affiliated with FAM, so thanks for that. Pondo, and then Susan Parmalee, and then Eva O'Keefe.
Don't start my time yet, but I want to say publicly that FAM is our neighbor, and they are the best. They help everybody, and through our programming, we can help those that are younger too. So, Honorable Mayor, City Council, you all know what we're about. You've seen the COA hats probably on the beach trail, going through town on bikes. You'll be seeing them on our biking club we're starting this summer. Just a lot of events that have started through COA Community Outreach Alliance. But the best thing is that over the years, we've been helping build a venue for clinics, for music, for a lot of other things that kids need to come and participate in, from guitar lessons to yoga. And then going outside, tomorrow night at 5:30, I'll be down on the high school tennis courts with 20 high school students with 2 other pros and giving them free lessons as the boat takes off from Dana Wharf with 30 kids on it from COA that they've donated. So COA is just getting an alliance with everybody, and Mary is one of our biggest alliance next door, because we take food out on Saturday as part of our ministries too, and she gives us their extra food because they're closed on Saturdays. She's helping us get other grants too, because we're just started. We're only 2 years old. Lori, one of the things I wanted to mention, because we didn't get to speak to, and then I'll have my program director just share, because she's fast, is when marijuana is legalized, and praying it's not, you should get a hold of Colorado and find out what the policing issues are there. And that's one thing to consider, because that's November. That's very quick. So in that field, that might be something you might want to consider. And thank you, City. You've helped me build my ministries by approving the building permits. The process, it was long, and I appreciate it. This is Terry Steele. She's our Executive Program Director.
Hi, thanks for all you do for the community. And I wrote down the first message as the meeting began: investing in today to protect tomorrow. I almost teared up because I work hand in hand with a lot of the at-risk kids, and we have HA on Tuesday nights, and I've had a chance to talk to a lot of them that are in full-blown addiction. And our focus, of course, is the adolescents and teens, and our hope is that they never go go there. So let's invest in the kids, and I love to see what you guys are doing. I've raised all 3 of my boys here. My last one's a junior at San Clemente High. Tim, thanks for coming to all the plays, and all of you who are participating, the ribbon cuttings over the weekend for 3 parks. All these things that you are doing are investing in our future. And COA just wants to help bridge some of the gap when it comes to the addiction. We work close with the Wellness Center. Susan Parmalee, we're on her coalition. We raise money. We work with a lot of the parents. We're just trying to get the word out and let them know what's trending in addiction. But our main focus is for the adolescents and teens to give them a hope, give them a passion. We have yoga, dance, guitar, theater, you name it. And all of it comes from people in the community who have stepped forward saying that they realize that there's a problem, and how do we address it at an early age so that these children feel hope versus giving up. And it's not going to, we have to stop the stigma. We have to get people to talk about the issue that drugs are starting earlier and earlier. Self-image issues, a lot of that through social media has exacerbated the problem. And we just want young parents to know that these things will come up. I was a scout leader for 16 years. I know a lot of the boys, because it was Boy Scouts that lost their life or committed suicide. And it was heartbreaking because I knew them as little boys, and no kid ever told me they were going to grow up to be a drug addict. And then when I look at the book that we had at the Night of Remembrance event last September, and we lost 85 kids from this community, my heart still breaks every time I open that and I see the names and I remember how much hope they had. So COA's basically 2 years in. I have a strong background in working with children, and I'm just thankful that we have a community that truly loves the kids here, and that we could all work together with all the different agencies and try to make parents aware, children feel hopeful. And one thing before closing I want to say, TLC is Talega Life Church. They allowed COA to go on their campus as a non-overtly religious entity so that we would break down any barriers that would keep anybody from coming. So it's all religions are welcome, anybody without faith. It's teaching the kids more about becoming strong within themselves so that they don't choose drugs. And then their faith and their churches can help. But if you belong to a church and you want to get involved, we would welcome you as well. Thank you.
I just want to say one last thing, too. Just very proud that Los Angeles, Vicky Vargas, come in, and Vicky Vargas is on line 1, NBC News. The Presidential Summit, they came out and used COA's site behind our new venue as 100 heroin addicts are going to a meeting. And that was exciting because all the after-school kids saw the news trucks there. And then the Night of Remembrance, KCAL and Channel 11. So some news stations are hearing about us, but in San Clemente, we're kind of like an alliance. So we're trying to do everything with everybody, because it's not just a Pondo issue. I can solve it, and Susan can't just solve it, and Mary can't just solve it. The city together we can. That's what's beautiful about this whole platform. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Susan Parmalee, and then Eve O'Keefe.
This is like a roll call of people that give back to the community. Wow.
Well, I'm just going to, one quick thing. The marijuana vote's not inevitable. Everyone's got to talk about it. We look at Colorado. It's not time yet. Other things have to go first. And now that I've been at a high school for 2.5 years, I always bring my, it has a new name. I call them audiovisuals, but teachers call them something new now. So you don't have to write them down, Tim. I put my facts down for you. We've really been honored to be included again in the list of social service grantees, and we could not be doing all the things we're doing without knowing the city's behind us, both financially and with in-kind, when you let us use spaces and present without charging a fee, and we really couldn't even be getting access to the kind of funding. We've been lucky to be working on a federal drug-free communities grant for the last year. This grant is going to set us up for the possibility of getting 6 years of $100,000 a year to work on prevention efforts in this town. And without the city on board as one of our partners, we couldn't be doing that. So again, thank you for that. One of the things you received today is the Take the Survey. We are preparing a community assessment of the substance abuse issues in town so that we can write the grant for the drug-free community. So we need a lot of responses on this grant. So pass it on, pass the website link to your friends. The more answers we get on that, the more accurate our data is. And we'll be happy to come and present that assessment to the council when it's complete. We've really been pleased with the response to the Wellness and Prevention Center. We feel like over the past year, the awareness of the center has grown. The number of referrals that I get directly from parents in the community now surpasses all other referrals, including school disciplinary referrals. Sometimes I'm able to talk to a parent and refer them to a resource without even working with their kid, which is probably one of the most effective things we can do to get them connected right away to community resources. Because when your kid's at school, they should be in class. So this is really what we're really pleased about. And we're also excited that we have some funding opportunities coming up, and we have a very generous donor paying for our grant writer right now. So we're really excited to grow over the next year and kind of present our progress again with our year-end report. So thanks again for your support.
Thank you. And Eva O'Keefe, and that's my last card. There's someone else that wants to speak. Now's your chance.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mayor Baker and City Council. Thank you so much for the budget presentation. I really appreciate you guys getting the 1.5 deputies. However, I think if we could maybe add a little bit more to that in the years to come, or even on this budget year. Some of the things about San Clemente, we have grown 30.8% since the year 2000. We only had 45,000 people in the year 2000. We have 65,000 now. And at the current ratio of deputies per people, we're at 0.67. According to FBI statistics, there are 7 cities out of 525 cities from 50,000 to 99,000 that have such a ratio. That puts it in the bottom 1.6% nationwide in terms of deputies per 1,000. Obviously, we're not the same town that we were 15 years ago or 20 years ago. We obviously have the challenges of Proposition 47. We have La Pata. We have new homes. We have the outlet mall. We have a freeway that goes up and down. We have increasing number of transients, recovery homes. And I know you have heard all the stories. I know you've gotten the emails about, a lady in the house with her 3 kids locked up, someone at south of Nix getting hit. Again, I think we want to make it that San Clemente is not open for business for criminals. We want to make this a really safe city for everyone to enjoy. And go back to our motto, our mission statement, maintain a safe, healthy atmosphere in which to live, work, and play. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, with that, I will close the public hearing. We'll start talking about decision packages here.
Do you have any other questions and comments on the budget at all? I mean, this would be an opportunity if there's anything else you want to talk about or have someone come up, or we could just move to the decision package deliberation.
Well, I do have one question about the budget. We didn't talk about ambulance funding. Eric, would you update us on what we're doing with the ambulance situation?
So
Is that your,
Yep.
that is your
Sure.
field of expertise?
As Judy mentioned in the public safety side specific to fire, one of the recommendations that OCFA had recommended when the potential of a hospital closure was looming, the $1.2 million price tag, and there was 2 components to that: adding a 4th firefighter, as Judy already communicated, and then also discontinuing the seasonal service and going to a full-time service. However, the council had already done that, and we're in the middle of a pilot program for 1 full-time ambulance that's currently being provided by CARE Ambulance Services. That full-time pilot program will end in November of this calendar year, and we'll be coming back with the findings to the council in terms of how much it costs to run, how much revenue we received, and potentially some recommendations to the council in terms of potentially going out to RFP for a long-term agreement for ambulance services or seeking direction from the council on other alternatives. I do know, and I know Chief Abel is here, or he was here a minute ago, that the demand is there. in terms of that full-time, and it does help, especially as we're growing into this May 31st date where the closure will occur and response times will be affected because of, having to drive to either Mission Hospital or the Laguna Hills Memorial Care. And so they've been working in our fire station, and it's been working well and has had no issues, and they've been working collaboratively, both OCFA and CARE. CARE is also a provider of the surrounding EOAs, is what they're called, emergency operating areas, within Dana Point and San Juan Capistrano. So they also provide backup services to themselves. So in the event that a CARE unit that we currently have is in San Clemente is called and we get another call, CARE unit from San Juan or Dana Point can come in to assist with those calls as well.
Okay, and with that, we're going to, Councilmember Ham has talked a couple of different times about looking at our subscription model and talking about that. Is that going to be part of that also, Eric?
Yes, sir. So at the previous council, we had an agenda item to update our ALS and BLS fees. And the direction from council was to revisit the subscription program to see if it could be brought up a little bit because it hasn't been revisited in quite some time. And then also potentially come up with a program where if you are a subscription holder, you would pay a discounted rate for ALS or BLS. And if you were not a subscription holder, you would pay the full cost for ALS and BLS. And then in addition to that, we were directed to look at a potential excessive call scenario that we'll be working with the city attorney on. And then also looking at a first responder fee, because we have been, with the sober living facilities and other types of medical services in the city growing, we've been taxed with 911 calls. And so that's when those calls are taken up, those vehicles are basically out of service for when other calls come up, whether it be a heart attack, stroke, et cetera. And so we'll be looking at that as well to see if we can come back with some type of levy from a first responder fee.
Okay, thank you. And while we're on the hospital subject, I want to say a couple of words about that. First off, I want to thank this city council for unanimously supporting all of the attempts to keep this hospital open. I want to thank the city manager, and I want to thank the assistant city manager for their efforts in this regard. They've done an outstanding job of shepherding us around to all these meetings. We met with the Attorney General's Office of California Department of Public Health. We met with Memorial Care a couple of different times. A couple of times in Sacramento. But I want to thank you both for all your efforts in that, on behalf of all the residents of San Clemente that really would like to see this hospital stay open. So it's going to be a sad day on May 31st.
I think we've made, it's not support, I think we've made quite an investment in terms of pursuing policy and having a representative up in the Capitol on the city's behalf trying to help us on this. And so we've not only, we've made the votes, but we've also outlaid quite a bit in terms of funding, and we'll continue to do so to try and defend ourselves, obviously, from a lawsuit, but also to pursue policy outcomes that we need to have to support the hospital.
And that money, from my point of view, has been well spent, because the assistance up there at the Capitol, it's a maze up there, and without somebody to guide you through that maze,
yeah, I think we were struggling.
It would have been enormously difficult. So anyway, thank you.
Bob, if I just make one change to what you said, I agree with everything, except you said it'll be a sad day. And I think the appropriate verb would be dangerous. It's going to be a dangerous day when the hospital truly closes. So.
There's no doubt about that. We've got I've said it many times, that's what did it for me. The study that says your mortality rates go up by 5 to 15% when you do exactly what's happening, that's what did it for me. I'm not a healthcare professional, I'm not a paramedic professional, but when I read studies like that, my goodness, it becomes, I believe the term is intuitively obvious to the most casual observer. So anyway, thanks. Go ahead.
Just to have a complete discussion, can you talk a little bit about water? And in terms of the I've got the budget, but, you know, with the change in the drought outlook and kind of how the residents can think about water and the fees we've collected and whatnot in the next 12 months.
I'm going to ask Dave Riebensdorf, our Deputy Public Works Director, to come up and talk to that.
Thank you. There have been quite a few changes with water over the last year, and even as recent as last week. The State Water Resource Control Board, at its meeting last Wednesday, made modifications to its findings and determined that agencies could either keep their current allocations, which for San Clemente means about a 24% reduction, or they would have an option for self-certification. For San Clemente, the self-certification, since we're so highly reliant on water from Metropolitan Water District, we'll have to find out and see where Met comes back. They're going to look at the last 3 years of water supply and then also look at the next 3 years and see what the potential water demands are, and then make a determination for what their projected supply will be to their Southern California customers. In the initial findings, what they're looking at right now is that they currently reduced from a level 3, which required 15% allocations, down to a level 2. And in addition, they're currently looking at most likely having enough water to serve for at least the next 1, potentially up to 3 years. So we're not anticipating any allocations from Metropolitan Water District, but if the drought continues, there may be continued allocation. So it's a complete change in the way the state is looking at allocations, and most likely with the certification, the state will, or the city will be moving out of allocations, or if we do have allocations, it'll be a much smaller amount than we're currently in through that self-certification. The deadline for MET and MODOC is June 15th to provide information to its customers, and then the city has until June 21st to come up with, or June 22nd, for its self-certification. If we do move away from allocations at the June 21st City Council meeting, staff will be coming back to the council at that time to look at a reduction from the level 3 allocations that we're currently under and move to a lower level, such as level 2 or level 1 allocation, which would mean currently we have drought assessment penalties in level 3, so we'd be able to move out of those drought assessment penalties, and that would go into effect immediately. So for customers in their June water use and their July bill, there would no longer be assessments for drought allocations.
So I guess 3 questions. One is, you're going to be giving us a separate report on everything you just talked about at a very near-term council meeting, is the first question?
Yes. Since we won't know from MET until June 15th, the soonest we can get to the council would be June 21st, and then we'll have our
Okay,
our
and then
recommendation at that
the
time.
second thing is, based on everything you know, is there anything we should be looking at differently in this budget package? Or is, in terms of, are there any financial impacts to the changes that are happening that would have a bearing on our operating or our annual budget?
But I guess
Will you be prepared to answer that in June when you come back?
Yeah, what we'll anticipate is water use increasing somewhat. We want to keep the conservation messaging out there. It's an improvement for our operating budget, certainly. We've projected very, very low use next fiscal year, so likely revenues will come up. But all of that will be evaluated in the cost of service study. They'll be ongoing over the next 6 months or so. So that cost of service will help to determine, on a water rate perspective, what we should be charging customers.
And then, could I ask that when you come in June, you also give us an update and a plan on the fees and the penalties that were collected in the last calendar year, what the city's course of action should be for that money?
There were two options in this current budget. There was $270,000 that was recommended, and $200,000 of that was to provide supplement to MODOC and Metropolitan's programs that they currently have available. And that's for like low-flow toilet programs, smart timers, and existing programs that are out there. So it's to supplement that. Say, for instance, if customers are given $100 for a smart timer, the city could, augment that with $20 or $40 on top of that. And same thing with turf removal. If it's $2 a square foot, the city may come back and add another $1 per square foot. So $200 of that $270,000 is there. And then an additional $100,000 is proposed in the CIP budget, and that's to look at recycle water expansion and to look at additional master plan and update of the model to see if we can add additional customers.
Okay, and was the reclaimed water project for North Beach?
No, it was not for North Beach. There
was some conversation that the money could be used to extend reclaimed water down to North Beach at one point, so that's not on the table anymore.
I'm just trying to think of any significant customers down in that area.
Beach Club.
At the Beach Club. Ole Hanson Beach Club?
Yeah.
Yes. Ole Hanson Beach Club is currently, or here in the very near future, will be retrofitted. Actually, all the irrigation systems are going to be replaced. And a meter has been installed, and so the Beach Club will receive recycled water. But the Beach Club, because of its proximity to the treatment plant, the pressure is very low, so a pump is being added to allow irrigation in that area.
So my question is, the penalty money is being used for that improvement, or you don't?
Yes, some of the penalty money is being used for that currently, yes.
Dave, ACCOC Water Committee just finished a white paper on exactly the subject matter, on the utilization of these fees, and what some suggested best practices are. My interest is, of course, and I'm glad we're actually expending $200,000 of that for trying to find relevant water usage projects. One of the things I'd like to see is that we have a plan put into place over a multi-year period of time where all of the money that was collected, I think it was just, what, $900,000?
It's close to 1.3.
1.3.
Yes.
That we have a plan to expend all of those funds on these types of things. Either it's going to be $200,000 or $300,000 outlay over a 4-year period of time. I think a lesson learned from the beach parking fund is we need to have a structure in place to get that money back into these water conservation programs, and so that ideally at the end of the day that fund would be a zero balance and all that money would be in water conservation projects around town. So I'll get a copy of that ACCOC document and send it to you because they had some other ideas in there on how to utilize those funds to get water conservation savings now. So.
Okay. Yeah, the recycle water expansion, if that happens and is approved by council, depending on what happens with the master plan as well, that potentially could be a $3 million project. So some of those funds could be used for that as well.
Anybody else? I got one more budget question that we didn't cover. A couple of months ago when we talked about City Hall and keeping City Hall here, did I see anything in the budget about maintenance for this building, capital improvements here, anything that we're going to do to put some Band-Aids on this building?
So we have, you want to answer that, Ken?
There were some projections shown in 2018, 2019, 2020. Big money. But that all kind of came prior to the decision that was made. So we just projected the funding, not really knowing what was going to happen there. I've been discussing it with the maintenance manager as well. What is it that we're going to do? When the building was assessed, there were short-term, mid-term, and long-term improvements. So I'm sure we can inch it along, but similar to some of those photos I showed you on some of the bathrooms, obviously it gets to a point where degradation occurs and full replacement is needed. I think it's something that the CIP team will have to kick around, but those those funds are projected, and I'm sure finance use them in their projections to give you all of the outlay for the next current years.
The point I'm trying to make is we've got a schedule, we've got a plan for this building, we've got some ideas about how it's done. We don't want it to fall down before that plan is implemented. So I'm just encouraging everybody to not forget about that.
We will put our thinking caps on.
Okay.
As a point of fact, it's $3.5 million that's going to roll out of some reserve funds starting in fiscal 2018. And then the rehab is another $5,500,000 coming out of the general fund in 2018 and 19. Big money. I mean, not big money for what you're contemplating doing, but in the scheme of this budget, it is.
Right.
And my point exactly. Let's make sure that we're thinking about those kind of things. Gotcha.
Okay. If we don't have any other questions related to the budget, we can move on and get council to deliberate on whether you would like us to include these or not in the final budget that we'll bring back to you.
Okay.
We've lost a council member, but.
No. We'll do them in order here. Okay, somebody want to make a motion about the, do we need motions and all that, Joanne? Should we do it that way, or should we just say yay or nay? All right, who's in favor of doing the San Clemente trolley project? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Opposed. So I guess we're doing the San Clemente trolley project. Okay. All right, who's in favor of doing the gas tax fund intersection control Forster Ranch Park entrance? Aye. Any opposed? That one is everybody. Okay, that was easy.
That was easy. Okay, so I just want to remind everyone in the public watching that you can see the city's budget online. This is the link to the budget. You can go onto our city website, and there's also some other spots here that'll lead you right to the budget. You have a question?
No.
No? And then finally, I just want to remind everyone that the budget adoption, the next meeting we'll have will be on June 13th, Monday. That's a special day for council meeting, not a Tuesday this time. It will start at 6 p.m. and we'll have agenda reports for budget adoption and other related agenda reports regarding the budget.
Judy, tell us about the budget adoption process. Are we gonna recap a couple of things? What's the plan here? A 5-minute recap, a 2-hour recap? What are you gonna do?
I keep hearing 5 slides. I think what we'll do is, it'll be a very short recap, just going over, we have to integrate the 2 decisions you just made into the numbers. So I'll come with, here's the new numbers on the funds. We'll keep it brief if that's what council's direction is. If that's what you would like, we'll keep it very brief and just ask for, a vote to adopt the budget.
Okay.
Council, really quickly before we adjourn, one of the things because it came up tonight by a few of the speakers, is one of the things I'd like to do is concluding our budget proceedings after it's done and we've made these decisions. One of the things I'd like to do is continue the conversation about public safety. There's been a lot of discussion about dispatch time, staffing levels, other items, and I'd like to have it, if possible, in July, after our June meetings are over in July, to be able to have an ongoing conversation where we would invite the Chief of Police Services perhaps to come and do a presentation about, probably set up maybe even for a conversation about the master plan or public safety master plan, but to maybe do a review for the folks at home that is a little more in depth into staffing levels and the policing and the dispatch efforts and other things. Obviously, this conversation is ongoing, and so after the budget wraps up in July, I'd like to be able to bring that up, and maybe we could chat about it at greater length then.
And I may add as a suggestion, we could segue that into our quarterly reports quite nicely, because the quarterly reports talks about the performance measures, the calls for service, and those types of things related to public safety. So we could also have it be co-joined with that so that he could also have an opportunity to go into more of that detail.
When is the quarterly report being presented?
We just finished the third quarter.
And you won't get the final end of year, the state of the city, and the fourth quarter doesn't happen until probably around September, October, because we have to close and do all the year-end adjustments.
I'd like to be able to have that. I mean, we're going to adjourn. I think we have one meeting in July?
We only have
Yes.
one, so I wanted to bring that up. There's only one. So I'm not sure what staff has on that agenda already that we have to get to.
Play it by ear.
August is fine.
Play it by ear. We'll maybe the meeting in August, so we'll just, I think it'd be worthwhile having that conversation sooner rather than later.
And I'd like to support Tim in that. And what I hear loud and clear, somewhere we have to find that connection between the numbers and the emotions, because if the community is having anxiety or not feeling good, it really is interesting, but it's not a solution to show trends in crime, because, so somewhere in this discussion has to be a concept, a framework, a strategy, so that the numbers have meaning, and the end result is our community has no doubt in their mind that they live in a really safe place, because they do.
Yeah, I think that there was a saying I heard one time, to a person only has a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And so in this case, I think that it's worthwhile in this conversation about policing to be able to address a whole combination of things we're doing across the spectrum, from the recent zoning ordinances to the hiring of the crime prevention services officer, that we're attacking causal factors as well as the end results, and we hope that there's this whole effort. It's just not how many crime is over. There's no strong correlation there, so maybe this will be the start of a conversation about it that should go on at greater length. So just want to put that request out there.
Do you need a motion, since Judy said it, to adjourn?
No, that's okay. We don't have any.
No, you need.
I was just going to, we don't have any oral communications.
Okay.
Parts, so.
I think
I'd like
you
to
need a
remind
motion.
everybody about the Memorial Day celebrations on Monday. Yeah. Somebody gonna, we need a motion to adjourn, or we?
No, I didn't.
You do
I
need a
didn't.
motion to
We
adjourn,
do.
because we're adjourning
Yeah.
to a special.
There we
meeting.
go. Go ahead.
Okay, I move we adjourn to an adjourned regular city council meeting to be held on June 13th, 2016, in council chambers located at 100 Avenida Presidio, San Clemente, California. Closed session items to be considered at 5 p.m. The public business session will commence at 6 p.m. The June 7th, 2016 meeting was rescheduled to June 13th, 2016, to allow the council chambers to be used as a polling place for the presidential primary election on June 7th.
Yeah, but before I, you good? Before I second that, I just want to say on behalf of the city council, big thank you to all the staff that stayed late on a Tuesday night and got this accomplished. Great job.
Amen.
That was my second.
Okay, a motion by Ward, second by Ham. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.